man with black hair stood in the lab, carrying out an experiment. Every action follows a process. When water molecules vibrate rapidly, they release heat and the water temperature rises, causing it to boil. The man watched the whole cooking process with interest. His mind worked like magic. Soon the contents of the flasks were cooked. He was brewing black coffee. The black-haired man called out to someone. 3 girls came up to him at once. Each was beautiful in her own way. They snuggled close and looked at him with admiration. His name was Shaw. Shaw was thrown into another world and built a life full of strange events, searching the internet for knowledge of the primordial realm and using mind magic to repeatedly invent cheats, a life forged by fate that began 2 years ago. An inventive video streamer showcased clever inventions built from production materials familiar to everyone. The show launched its channel on its 20th birthday, and by the 3rd month, the channel's subscriber count was. Only 5 people showed up, which bothered him a bit. Shaw hoped for a better future for his channel and believed that by uploading every day someone would eventually notice and his viewership would grow dramatically. Upset by the channel's small subscriber count, the guy went out that same day to film a new video. Moments later, he was in the woods with his backpack lying beside him. Waking up in an unfamiliar place, he emptied the backpack. His backpack held a towel, a lighter, a plate, some chocolate, a container, and a multi-tool. He was glad to have them. Shaw checked his phone and found no signal, and the battery was nearly dead because he had forgotten to charge it. Shaw suddenly came to his senses, stared around in shock and horror, and realized he had no idea where he was. Once calm, Shaw set off to find a way out of the forest, and though he had hiked since childhood and knew a lot, he did not recognize the plants and had never seen anything like them. Terrifying thoughts filled him. He feared he had accidentally wandered into a primeval forest forming on its own, and Shaw thought he was in the afterlife or in another world. Rain suddenly started in the forest, so he realized he needed to find shelter and began to accept that he might be in another world. Sheltered from the rain inside a hollow tree, Shaw thought about another world and saw no sign of magic or fantasy. He hadn't been back in the forest for a long time, and by the campfire at night, he regretted never meeting the girls and knew he did not want that kind of life. The next day, Shaw wandered for a long time through the forest searching for someone, walking while leaning oddly on a wooden stick, and then he stopped when he came upon a small field of white flowers ahead. He noticed how large the flower was. The flowers resembled banansies, but banansies have only 3 petals. Therefore, banansies are not as large as these flowers. Shaw noticed the petal tips were slightly translucent, making the flowers look like sunflowers. Suddenly, the flowers trembled and withered, and shining black beads slowly emerged from them, surprising Shaw. He pulled his phone from his pocket to record the amazing, shifting display of unknown colors. His phone died, so the man put it away. Shaw went to the flowers and pulled out a bead, and the man watched them with interest, wondering whether they were edible. Not staying in one place, the man kept going and soon reached the waterfall. Shaw sat on a rock, exhausted and thinking about the possibility of finding other people. Suddenly, the man felt pain. A large insect that looked like a tick or spider bit him. Horrified, Shaw tried to pull it off his hand, but it clung on. Shaw soon lost consciousness. Some time later, he still hadn't woken and feared it was the end when a blurred, angelic silhouette appeared, but it was a beautiful girl who noticed he had opened his eyes. Stunned by her beauty, Shaw felt like he was in paradise, but the girl did not understand what he was saying. She tightened her grip on the magic staff, wanting to know his identity and whether Camillo had sent him, but Shaw said he did not know Camillo, disagreed with her, and did not think he looked suspicious. To clear himself of suspicion, he introduced himself to the girl. It was the first time the girl had heard a name as unusual as his. Shaw thanked his rescuer for her help. Rubia introduced herself to the man, and it turned out the show was paralyzed by a spider bite, causing him to faint, so Rubia used magic to decontaminate him, and he can stay at her house until he feels better. Shaw saw the girl using magic and understood he had stepped into another world. The girl turned the other way, drawn to something. Rubia was interested in the man's unusual items. Curious, she wanted to know what they were. Noticing a container in her hand, he said he had found it in the woods. The man opened the container and said that on the way he had seen white flowers that wilted and died. Then red berries grew from them. Rubia looked into the container with delight. They were small merch berries. Shaw didn't know the berries' names or their meaning, and he took that in calmly. To the girl's surprise, he offered to give her the berries. After all, Rubia had saved him. The girl panicked because the berries were too valuable. He couldn't see why she panicked and didn't think the flowers were rare since they were common, and they were near where he had fainted, so Shaw suggested they go look at them together, and the girl blushed and stared at him in a daze. Timidly and sheepishly, Rubia agreed to the man's suggestion. Shaw couldn't understand her strange reaction and stared at the confused girl. From that day on, Shaw moved into Ruby's small house and lived with her, and he realized he had been transported to another world, one that felt much like the Middle Ages back home, but had no gas, running water, electricity, or modern conveniences, and he could barely fetch water from the well. No status screens floated before his eyes. A spider attacked him, an exception among exceptions since monsters almost never did. None of the reincarnation stories he knew described this. Thinking about reincarnation, he was approached by a girl who used magic to light the fireplace. Then Rubia invited him to start the meal, and he watched the scene with a dazed expression while Shaw was delighted by the magic. Embarrassed and timid, Shaw began to speak. After Rubia helped him, he thought it proper to ask her about it, but instead he asked her to teach him magic and then bowed to her. It's been a while, the girl explained she couldn't teach him magic until he became her student. Only then, as a true master, would she have the right to teach him. A true master is a profession like a scientist or an engineer. Rubia had a true master certificate that looked like a pendant with a chainter. Many eccentric people study magic on their own. To Rubia, a real scientist was someone who understands why things happen and pursues the truth. Magic, to her, embodied that process. Ignoring this now is like putting the cart before the horse. Shaw understood the girl's words and thought magic would be convenient. He cleared his throat to draw attention and was about to speak. Being forever beholden to a girl felt wrong to him, so he wanted to find at least some kind of job. Ruby suggested Shaw become a real scientist or try something else. The man refused her. Shaw dropped to his knees, bowed before the girl, and begged Rubius to accept him as his disciple. She felt uneasy because not everyone can become a true master, so they first needed to check if the guy had the right qualities, and Shaw would do anything to learn magic. The girl asked the man about his faith in God. The man looked at her blankly but answered anyway. Shaw said confidently that he did not believe in God. Having never seen God, he trusts only what he can see, and even a great man's words seem like half-truths until he sees proof himself. The girl asked him about God's miracles. Shaw has never seen a miracle from God either. If miracles happen, there must be a cause and a process. The man sounded confident. If someone finds the cause and seeks the truth, they can even shape God's miracles to their own ends. Ruby stared at the man, stunned. His answer was perfect for someone who wanted to become a real scientist. She wanted to know his identity, but told him it was only a verbal test. The real test was still ahead. After a while, they went outside. Ruby placed her staff by the stove and asked Shaw to light it. He was surprised by the sudden offer, but he knew that if he understood the theory, magic would help him. After the words were spoken, the girl stood quietly, knowing it would be very hard for him. Shaw considered the theory of magic. To burn something you need heat. He thought about ways to create that heat. Compressing air releases a lot of heat. That's how car engines worked. Shaw realized that compressing the air would produce heat. As soon as he imagined it, a ball of heat appeared in his palms. Rubia could not believe how quickly he had made it. Shaw used his palm to push the ball of heat into the fireplace onto the firewood. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then the ball flared up again and lit the wood, and everything went as planned for the show. Something went wrong. The heat ball was too powerful, and the fireplace caught fire and exploded. Rubia hit the ground in shock and was covered in ash from the blast. The sorceress wanted to ask the man what reason he had for using magic. Shaw admitted he needed a heat source to light the fireplace, so he decided to compress the air. His words surprised her. He was a simple man who had never trained under a true master. It was hard for her to see how he had done it. Rubia agreed with the man's suggestion. The idea was correct in theory, but applying it as a process here was the wrong choice. He needed to imagine a reason why a fire could burn. The man thought about it. In this case, the fire started when the carbon in the wood combined with oxygen in the air, forming a gorongi element. Lost in thought, Shaw wasn't looking from the ignition image's point of view. Rubia said the image was optional. He just needed to imagine the phenomenon of gorongi. At that moment, the man focused only on carbon and oxygen compounds. A stream of magic began gathering in his palm as soon as flames appeared on the firewood. The fire reignited. A huge stream of flames shot from the chimney, but this time there was no explosion and the fire survived. Shaw was pleased with the fire and watched the flames in the fireplace with delight. Rubia felt completely overwhelmed by the man's strength and talent. He had understood the whole logic of magic from a single piece of advice. The man cheerfully reminded her that the student she had accepted, your girl, was still in deep shock from what had happened. This is how Shaw became Ruby's disciple, studying under a true master. He couldn't understand how magic worked because he only knew physical phenomena and assumed anyone could do it. The people of this world, however, lacked even the most basic scientific knowledge. Thrilled, he realized magic was too easy for him, It made a great theme for his new video. With it, he will be able to gain over 10 million subscribers. For him, that number will no longer be just a dream. When Shaw began studying with Rubia, his life changed immediately and became more varied. Besides cleaning the house, chopping firewood and fetching water, he now helps her collect plants and insects for his research. They walked through the forest while Rubia watched a beautiful butterfly with interest. Shaw practiced magic during breaks from his work, hitting. It was fascinating. Suddenly, a girl called out to him and asked what he knew about the theory of air compression. He knew that air cools when it expands, unlike when it's compressed. If you make atoms vibrate, you heat them up. If you stop the vibrations, they cool down. Shaw had more to say but stopped. The girl was surprised he knew so much. Rubia also noticed his good manners. A great mind and good manners are a rare combination in one person. The girl wanted to know where the man had studied it. Shaw lied and said he was just a simple student in his country. Rubia assumed his country had a very high level of education. Shaw had dropped out of school back home, so the girl's words embarrassed him, though he felt Japanese education was excellent. They soon reached the river. She said that if he grasped logic well, she would not need to teach him much, since he would be able to use other magic quickly. Shaw was doing something in the river. A man picked up a small stone and struck the water's surface with it. After a while, fish rose to the river's surface. They were completely immobilized. When the man struck a submerged rock, the shock wave stunned the fish, so Shaw didn't have to catch them himself, and the man cleaned and cut the fish before leaving them on the stone. Shaw first used drying magic on the butchered fish. The fish dried quickly, but the drying was meant to convert its proteins into amino acids. He then switched to fermentation magic. In an instant, the dried fish was ready, and the man, pleased by the magic's usefulness, hung it on a stick. As time passed, Shaw used different kinds of magic, including fire to ignite things, heating magic to warm objects, and cooling magic. Using magic in his daily routine, he applied fermentation and vegetation techniques to boost crop growth. The magic also reduced his weight, letting him carry heavy objects easily. Magic dealing with physical phenomena was simple and required no casting, known as initial magic, and it was very useful in everyday life. Magic was only used on a small scale. It could light a fire in a cauldron, but could not turn the whole area into a sea of fire. It could heat the water in a pot, but not a pond. Depending on how it was used, it could also be used as an attacking magic. A man thought about magic while cooking a dish. Heating works on the same principle as a microwave oven. Someone could use it on a human body. All the water in a living body would boil and destroy it instantly. He felt a little scared at the thought. It was a terrible fate. Soon the food was ready. Rubia admired the appetizing dishes and their wonderful aroma. It tasted delicious. She noticed honey on the bread and wondered if the man had been stung, but that did not happen because he put a spell on the hive before collecting the honey. If Shaw had taken only a little honey, the hive would have recovered, and he felt guilty, thinking he needed to build another hive for the bees. Rubia tasted the honey with delight, not knowing the man could cook. He wasn't good at it, but he found the cooking process fascinating. Shaw meant that he enjoyed doing things in general. If he can't cook something, he'll try again. Calmly, he ate the food he had prepared. After the meal, Shaw stepped outside. Many bamboo-like plants grew around the house. They were called tiquerdo. Shaw saw they were easy to handle and had many uses. At the tiquerdo cabin, Shaw slightly injured his hand. The pain made him realize he should have put on gloves. A recent conversation came back to him. Shaw asked Rubia if healing magic exists. Rubia told him that healing magic does exist. Shaw then asked whether the magic could cure any disease or injury. Healing magic wasn't that convenient. It simply strengthened the body's natural healing, so it couldn't help if a disease was in its early or late stages. Eager to learn, he wanted to ask her again about healing magic. At the moment, using that magic here was impossible for him. She warned him not to even try to figure it out. Remembering the conversation, Shaw put on gloves and cut the bamboo, then fitted a thinner piece into the cut section with ease and pushed the finished structure into the ground. Magic formed as a stream above his palms. He aimed the compressed ball of air into the bamboo tube, where it slipped in easily. He then blocked the tube with a piece of bamboo slightly thicker than the hole and eased the air compression. When the air weakened, the bamboo cork shot up into the sky, and Shaw laughed happily because the experiment was a success. Had he filmed it, it would have become popular with school-aged children. Thinking about charging his phone, the man wanted to film the experiment, but there was no electricity. Then a voice sounded that drew Shaw's attention, and he turned toward it. A horse-drawn carriage stood by the wooden house. A group of girls arrived at the house door. They wanted someone to open the door. 2 of the 4 girls wore maid outfits when they came to meet Rubia. Shaw, hiding in the shade of a tree, watched the unexpected visitors with curiosity because he did not recognize them. 4 girls made up the group. The girl with glasses and the one with cat ears were maids. Another wore a tiara and looked like a true aristocrat. A bodyguard stood beside her. Ruby bowed her head and greeted the princess. The princess was unhappy because she wanted the girl to address her normally. Frowning and annoyed, the blonde wanted to know why the princess had come. A girl from her entourage had already gone into the house. She thought the reason for the visit was obvious. At first, the sorceress assumed the visit was about an invitation. She had turned the girl down many times, but that was not why the princess had come. There were rumors about Rubia in the castle. They said the famous witch from Farlane kept a little bird she had found, and that the girl had been wandering around buying men's clothes and other things. Shaw suddenly entered the house, surprising all the girls and proving the rumors true, so he awkwardly offered to make tea, not understanding why they called him the little bird and having no idea what to say. Rubia felt stunned and annoyed that a group of girls had come so far over such a trivial matter, and she regretted wasting the princess's time, but the princess did not mind and had only stopped by Rubia's on her way home from work. Soon Shaw made tea and served it to the guests. A man introduced himself to the princess, said he was a student of Rubia, and she became curious because his name sounded odd even for a foreigner. He paid no attention to it. He prepared rare sweets from his homeland for the princess. The princess looked at the dessert in surprise and thought it was made from a cow. That was not the case. Shaw served the princess chocolate, told her it was very sweet and delicious, and invited her to try it. Rubia and the princess eyed the chocolate slice with suspicion. After they overcame their doubts about the unfamiliar treat, they tasted it together, and their cheeks turned red. With flushed cheeks, they savored the incredible sweetness of chocolate as it melted in their mouths. The princess had never known that food could be so sweet and delicious. Rubia looked at the man with the light and wanted to learn about chocolate and how to make it. Shaw said chocolate most likely comes from grinding nuts from the southern islands at the edge of the earth and mixing them with sugar until smooth. The princess hesitated because sugar was very valuable and hard to obtain in these lands. The girl asked the man if he had any chocolate left, and Shaw said only a little remained, so the princess asked him to sell her the rest, and she eagerly asked the price and offered him 3 gold coins. Offered 3 gold coins, he realized 2 silver coins a month were enough to live on and equaled 100,000 yen, so the 3 gold coins were worth 600,000 yen, and he was completely delighted. Soon Shaw received his 3 gold coins, and the princess took a whole chocolate bar. She was sorry she could not invite Rubia to the castle this time, but Rubia still ended up richer with that bar, and then the princess said goodbye and slammed the door. Rubia and Shaw stared at the closed door in silence. When the princess spoke again, she called to them, and the master and the disciple stepped into the courtyard. They did not understand why the princess had not left their house. The princess was curious about the device in the well, and when she asked Shaw, he said it was called a buzzing pump, and that he could use it to pump water from the bottom of the well. After his explanation, the man demonstrated the pump, and the princess was shocked to see water flow from it, thinking it was magic. That was not the case. It was just a trick anyone could do, so the girl tried moving the pump handle and water immediately poured out. Afterward, the princess wanted to know what the device did. Shaw handed her a piece of bamboo and demonstrated how the toy worked by spraying water. The princess examined the bamboo toy with curiosity, then she used it, and a jet of water shot from the device. The maid with cat ears got soaked, meowed, and ran from the water jet while the princess cheerfully sprayed her, and she tried to hide. Shaw explained to the girl that blocking the toy's hole would stop the water from coming out. The princess understood. After the man's question, she realized that a hole on the other side would let the water flow toward her. Now she understood how the man could pump water from the well. When the pump moved up and down, it created a vacuum in the pipe, and when the piston rose, the water was forced up by pressure. That was the magic of true masters. The princess liked the man's pump device, so she asked Shaw again to sell her a buzzing pump. After her suggestion, the princess tried to climb the well-lit well. Shaw worried about the girl's safety, but she kept climbing and soon stood at full height on the well's lid. The girl remembered that the man introduced himself and gave his name. When she introduced herself as Leela Farlane, Shaw realized with deep shock that his new acquaintance was the head of state. Leela continued talking in a confident, proud voice as she urged Shaw to accept her invitation to her castle. After a while, the carriage with the horses set off quietly, and thoughtful Shaw sat inside with his backpack beside him, remembering a recent conversation with the princess when he told Layla he was still a Rubia student, but it did not matter to her. She only needed his abilities. Having mastered so many truths, he was clearly no apprentice. She told him the state would provide food and clothing, and that his salary would be 3 gold coins a month, which stunned him because it totaled 600,000 a month. All the conditions sounded tempting to him. he would have to live in that world for a while. After all, having money was a good thing. The man was ready to accept Princess Layla's proposal, but Ruby's annoyed shout stopped him, and she told him it was only an invitation so he didn't have to agree. The man intended to accept the invitation. The terms suited him well. Princess Leela was willing to do anything for the show. Rubia was stunned by the princess's words. Immediately, Princess Layla threatened Rubia and said she might send an army against her. And when the sorceress refused the request anyway, the girl wanted Shaw to take Rubia's place. So Rubia frowned silently at Princess Layla, and Shaw awkwardly called out to the master. Rubia's house was close to the castle, so Shaw can keep fulfilling his duties as a student. Rubia disagreed with that. Ruby couldn't let her inexperienced student, whose reasoning resembled Shaw's dangerous style, get out of control, so she decided to act. If Shaw insists on going to the castle, Rubia will go with him. The sorceress finally accepted the princess's proposal. While they were traveling, the carriage hit a stone and lurched, causing everyone inside to fall to one side. Shaw was unlucky and hit the window when the carriage jolted. He couldn't fully feel the pain because Princess Layla distracted him. The girl leaned her whole weight on him, cheeks flushed as she stared at the black-haired man. Shaw wanted to check the princess's condition too, so he spoke to her and roused her, leaving her embarrassed. Coming to her senses, Princess Layla immediately pulled away from the man. Her face flushed, and she said in a confused voice that she was fine. The girl sat beside her friends, and the maid with glasses was named Ruminis, while the maid with cat ears was named Mimo. Princess Layla, 15, had been ruling the country alone since the king and queen died in the epidemic. She was still confused by the recent incident and blamed the strange carriage. The throne could only be taken at 18, so governing a region was normal, but Layla had exceptional ability and experience in all matters of the throne, and she was so skilled that even the ministers could not stop her. Shaw noticed Princess Layla was small but surprisingly strong. Layla glared at him when the carriage struck a stone again, causing Shaw to bump into something once more. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with the carriage, which felt too uncomfortable to ride even though the princess said it was a standard carriage, and after briefly blaming the road, he noticed the carriage was simply too rigid. Curious about rigidity in a carriage, the princess asked Shaw, who said a rigid carriage has its axle attached to the body, and after his explanation, she wanted to learn about other kinds of carriages. Installing a suspension would improve the rigid carriage. Princess Layla didn't understand what the man meant. Shaw did not explain it to her. Instead, he drew the bow shape he needed and wanted to know whether such a shape existed. This bow shape already existed. The artist continued drawing and soon painted another one on the opposite side. If you combine them, you get a diamond. The artist then finished the drawing details. After joining, they will expand and contract as shown in the figure. He suggested fastening them to the top of the wheel and threading the axle underneath, so the suspension can expand and contract when the wheels pass over large rocks or bumps, preventing the carriage from swaying. Shaw eagerly told others his plan, but the girls stared at him, stunned and surprised by his invention, and he felt awkward because he thought he had clearly explained the suspension. Princess Layla stood up quickly and asked someone to call Russell. The maids grew worried about the princess's movements and tried to calm the agitated girl because standing in the carriage was dangerous. Russell was not nearby, so they could not call him, and Shaw wanted to know who Russell was. Ruminis the maid told the man that Russell was a master craftsman, and he was in the castle workshop when a girl suddenly called out to him, and Shaw answered immediately. Princess Layla told the man with excitement that once they reached the palace, he had to tell about the pendant in the workshop. Soon they reached the castle. A workshop stood before them. The workshop was spacious and open. At the far end, a fireplace served as the place where inventions were made. Elves and dwarves worked eagerly in the workshop. Princess Layla hurried to find Russell. A gray-haired man immediately appeared before them, answering the princess's call. Russell was surprised to find the princess in the workshop. The man bowing to her noticed she was in a good mood, so Layla stopped Russell's bow. The girl wanted to show the man something right away. After a while, a buzzing, lidded pump was installed in the workshop. When it ran, it pumped water. To operate, the pump was placed in a bucket of water. Everyone in the workshop was stunned by how effective the invention was. Russell eagerly told the princess that the pump would sell well. The joyful girl already knew that. Shaw began explaining the pump. It was made from bamboo. The man wanted to make the pump from iron because the device had a high risk of failure. The man heard the other man's words and knew the iron device would last more than 10 years. Even though it would be expensive, Princess Layla didn't care about money or the cost. The girl ordered the artisan Russell to make a prototype pump from iron, and Layla then wanted to add something else. Princess Layla also asked Russell to build a carriage with a suspension and explained how it would work. Russell liked the idea because the carriage could sell at a good price. She knew that if a new high-performance carriage was released, the royal aristocracy would pay handsomely, and she was pleased. Shaw began explaining the suspension, drew it as a rhombus, and said it should be made from several boards of different lengths glued together. Russell wondered why they used boards of different lengths instead of a single board. Shaw noticed the man was very perceptive. The man explained the resonator by comparing it to jumping on a branch. As you bounce, the branch swings more and more. Russell got the demonstration because he used to play that way as a child. Shaw continued, saying that if someone swings too hard, the branch will eventually break, and that using boards of different lengths spreads the load and prevents breakage. Shaw wants a steel suspension for durability, but making it from elastic steel is difficult, so someone suggested using high-quality copper. Smiling, he said the suspension could be changed regularly and parts sold, so you could earn twice as much money, and Layla was stunned by his words. The girl quietly praised the show. The guy turned out to be far more perceptive than she expected. He smiled at Princess Layla's praise. Shaw returned to the carriage design and suggested the artisans add a mechanism to change the front wheel's angle, which would be slightly harder to build but would make the carriage more convenient. The workshop artisans understood the man's explanation. They realized his offer would greatly ease maneuvering the carriage through turns. Ride quality will improve too. At the show, artisans showed the enthusiasm expected from people in manufacturing. They quickly understood everything the speaker said. They also wanted to learn more about the carriage design. Soon the man was led to his workshop, and Shaw looked at the hut with delight because it was now his own workshop. Princess Layla told him he could find all the materials and craftsmen in the castle to create anything he wanted, and since she was counting on him, he went to his workshop. Beside the castle workshop stood a blacksmith shop, where dwarves made various devices from metal and other materials, and an artisan workshop specialized in fine finishing and engraving, which the elves handled while painting items elegantly. He noticed many types of wood in the materials department, and iron was available but rare and valuable. Shaw scanned the entire castle. On the way he passed the maid's room. Two maids he knew were inside, Rumani's and Nuomi. Nuomi was glad to see him. A door soon appeared before him. Shaw realized it was the master's office. Rubia took a while to pack, so she arrived late. She began placing her things around the office. Shaw offered to help the master, but Rubia refused because then she would not know where everything was. After that, he asked Rubia if other masters were in the castle. Rubia confirmed the elven master of true learning was there. He grew excited that a real elf was somewhere inside and wanted to see them. Suddenly, Rubia stepped up, stood as close as she could, said the elf was very old, and warned Shaw not to approach the elven master. Shaw still remembered Ruby's warning, but her words made him even more curious and eager to see real elves. Suddenly on the path, he saw a door ajar. Shaw grew curious when he saw her and walked over. The light in the room made him want to see what kind of place it was. As he moved to enter, heels clattered nearby. An angry voice called to the man, startling him, so he quickly turned toward it, and an elf stepped in front of him, annoyed by his presence and not knowing him, assumed he was an imperial. The elf eyed the man with suspicion. She still suspected he was an imperial spy. Shaw did not expect her to be so tall. A man looked up at the elephant that day. He had heard that elves kept growing taller until the end. By the time they were over 1,000 years old, they could be more than 2 meters tall. The man realized this was the real Master Rubio had mentioned. The elf eyed the stranger with irritation and still suspected him of being a spy. The man nervously told the woman right away that he was not a spy. Worried, the man added that he was a disciple of Master Rubia. The girl immediately changed, grasped Shaw by the chin and calmly studied him, and when the elf heard Rubia had taken an apprentice, she grew very curious about his appearance. After she spoke, the girl asked about Ruby's situation, feeling it was rude that she had not even greeted her colleague. Shaw told the elf that his master was staying at the castle because Rubia needed to prepare for the move, and the girl asked why he, as Rubia's student, had not come to greet her. The man told the woman again that he had a lot to do, but Shaw promised her he would stop by later to say hello. The situation still needs to be fixed because the elf was unhappy. Instead, she pushed the man into her office, knowing he did not know about her relationship with Rubia, so she decided to let him take responsibility for his master's rudeness. Shaw wanted to know the elf's identity, so she introduced herself immediately. The girl's name was Stella, and she said that if he really was Ruby's student, he would know her status. Shaw introduced himself in response, said he was a student of Rubia, then hesitantly searched his jacket's inside pocket and produced a gift to mark their meeting. Soon the man found what he needed, opened his hand, and offered 2 red berries to the girl, which Shaw saw as a valuable gift. Stella was stunned by his gift. It was a tiny, precious birch fruit whose berry had a rare crimson color. Awkwardly, the girl took the gift back and said it was good material. Stella, acting as head, then directed the man to a chair and told him to sit while the elf brewed a pico drink. When the pico was ready, the girl handed him the guy, and Sean noticed the drink looked and smelled like coffee. Shaw took the cup and tasted the pico. The drink was delicious, every detail perfect, from the fragrance to the deep bitterness, but he would still miss his world. After tasting pico, the man wanted to find out if it was easier to get. The drink was easier to find, but it was a little expensive. It was also available in the city, and Della promised to tell him about her favorite store. Without warning, the girl changed the subject and asked about the man's true identity. Shaw stared blankly at his companion, not understanding what she meant. Although he was only an apprentice to a real scientist, Stella did not believe him, since she had noticed his unusually high education and manners for this continent, the kind given only to children of royalty, nobles, or wealthy merchants. She could not recall any man his age who matched that description. Shaw was stunned that the girl knew everyone in that group. Della remembered everyone because they were respected customers. He admitted he came from a country Stella did not know, but she stayed suspicious, and his answer did not convince her. The tense man said it was because of the sea and couldn't say more, and the girl didn't like his cryptic words. Shaw was sure there were things Stella should not know, and he thought that was right. He refused to tell her the truth and warned her with the proverb that sometimes curiosity leads to elimination. Shaw realized that as Master Rubia's disciple, he was especially interesting to her, but they did not know each other well enough for a conversation like that, Stella, and she only frowned at his words. The girl then began to give an example of similar proverbs from her country in this world. It became clear to her that many people are indeed happier not knowing anything. Stella changed the subject. The girl peered at the lil merch berries with interest and wanted to know where the man had found them, since such deep crimson berries were rare. Shaw told her he had found them in the woods, and she realized he had probably seen flowers too, which the man agreed with, so after examining the berries, Stella put them in her box. After a while, the man drew a white flower with 5 petals on the board, and a crimson fruit sprouted from it. Shaw admired their beauty. Stella liked the man's drawing. The painted flower matched the description from the legends, and Shaw then offered to go see the white flowers with him. The man knew the forest around them, but he wasn't sure the flowers would be in bloom when they arrived. Stella gazed at the man, dazed and blushing. Shaw stared at her in disbelief. At his blank expression, she wanted to laugh but held herself back. She realized he didn't understand the meaning of his words. Now she knew he came from a distant country. Shaw understood nothing. Almost a miracle, the show got to see Lil Merch's flowers. The man knew this, but the flowers quickly wilted. Once calm, Stella told him it was impossible to just call someone to check the flowers. Shaw did not understand what the girl meant. Then the man finally understood Stella's words, and his face flushed with embarrassment. Shaw remembered Ruby's confused expression when he told her they'd stay together until the flowers appeared, whenever that might be. Suddenly the man realized everything. His face flushed with shame as he understood that Ruby's odd expression came from Stella finding out he had told Ruby. Embarrassed, Shaw tried to explain that he hadn't known what those words meant then. Stella stood up, slowly took off her cape and left it on the floor. The elf wanted to say something. Stella moved toward him slowly. His tone showed that Shaw had no relationship with Rubia. Her fingers lightly touched his chin. Shaw looked at her, embarrassed. In a seductive voice, she said she might try being with him. Stella fixed the guy with a charming gaze. Shaw stared at her, stunned. He finally came to his senses. He couldn't understand why Stella had chosen him. She could charm any man in the castle, and she took his hand and said seductively that she was tired of all the others. Stella's actions usually make the man stop. Without pausing, she knocked him onto the sofa and forced him to lie down to see whether he would resist or use anti-magic. At that moment, the door to the room burst open. Rubia stood grimly in the office doorway. The sorceress watched them in the room with a gloomy expression. The man, embarrassed, called out to the master in the room. Rubia moved closer without a sound. They remained on the couch in an awkward position. As Rubia reached them, she pulled the man and woman apart and shoved them off the couch. An angry blonde grabbed the guy by the collar. She had thought she wouldn't find him in Stella's office, but he was there, and the girl had already told him to stay away from her. However, the show had no choice. Stella suddenly stepped forward and pulled Shaw into her arms, leaving him blushing. He could only redden at her boldness. The elf spoke in a soft, seductive voice that made him even more embarrassed. Stella kept acting, moving closer to the guy's ears and noticing how round they were, wanting to get to know him better so he would fall in love with her. Rubia called to Stella. Frowning, the sorceress told Stella to step away from the show, but the elf refused to leave the guy, excited and unwilling to stop. Stella told Rubia she couldn't stop because he had called her to look at the white flowers. The sorceress screamed, shocked by the words. Embarrassed, Shaw wanted to explain himself. After all, Ruby had gone ahead and told him exactly what it meant to invite someone to view the flowers. That's why he told Stella about it. Stella moved closer to the embarrassed man. She watched the light show. The girl said Shaw was different from the other guys she'd met. She felt they were made for each other. Rubia cut Stella off and rudely called to the elf, and the elf and the man stared at the sorceress in confusion as she trembled with overwhelming emotion. Rubia gathered herself and, sounding confused, told Stella that Shaw had been the one to first suggest they look at the flowers together, closing her eyes from embarrassment as her face flushed red at the admission. Silence settled over the room for a moment. Shaw looked at Rubia with flushed cheeks, not expecting such a confession, and Stella burst into loud laughter, Peace, amused by Rubia's innocent words, making the witch from Far Lane blush with indignation. Rubia blushed and bristled at the girl's words, embarrassed as she insisted she was only 24 and that her naivety did not matter because Stella was already 450 years old. When Shaw heard Stella's age, he looked at her with admiration, surprised she was 450 years old. That was what it meant to be an elf. The man stared at the frozen elf with admiration and could not imagine anyone living so long. Stella was angry at his words and said something about memory. Angry, Stella tried to erase the man's memory. To make him forget her real age, she fired magic at him. He was shocked that he could dodge it. Anxious, the guy watched as the dust from her attack settled and Stella's silhouette appeared. She stared at him gloomily, reactivated her magic, and would not miss this time. Shrill screams from a boy came from Stella's office. Smoke from her attack seeped through the cracks in the office door. Princess Layla ran toward the loud noise. She wanted to know what was making the noise. Shaw hurried to the girl. The pale-faced man told Layla the office was too dangerous. Without another word, he lifted the girl into his arms with ease, noting how light she was. Shaw rushed out of the office without turning back and was followed by Stella's furious scream. After a while, the man broke free from Stella and, breathing hard from a long run, leaned against the wall. The princess noticed how wise the elves were, but not everyone could be guided by common sense. Princess Layla smiled when she realized they had reached the tower stairs and told the man there was a beautiful view at the top because she wanted to show it to him. Shaw noticed the stairs had many steps and the tower was too high. The man complained that he wanted an elevator, and since it was Princess Layla's first time hearing the word, she wanted to know what it meant. The man explained that when installing a cabinet on top of the tower, they could use a rope to lift it into a drawer, but it would require someone to pull the rope. They attach a weight slightly heavier than the girl to the rope, lower it from the upper floor, and someone slowly pulls it up. Princess Layla was delighted to understand how the elevator worked. But first they needed someone to hoist a kettlebell in the elevator, and that was all they could do right now because there was no electricity in this world, so he understood but still thought it was a bad option. If one side wins, the other loses. When one side makes life easier, the other suffers. Shaw and Leela soon reached the top of the tower. Shaw savored the beautiful view. Princess Layla told him she sometimes came to the tower when it carries. Seeing the city lit by fluorites clears her heart. Aware she owed her position to her vassals and people, the princess looked into the distance as she spoke. Shaw warned her that when people try to simplify everything, others end up suffering. The same applies to royal power. When those in charge oversimplify things, it makes life harder for the people. Even at 15, the girl already understood a great deal about life. Princess Layla called to Shaw, saying she had high hopes for him, and that with a scientist like him, the festival would succeed, and she added enthusiastically that they would develop the country. Shaw knew his knowledge of the old world could help the country develop, but he worried that an excessive fascination with technology would be seen as heresy. If people from other countries visit them, he can find clues to help him return to his world. Princess Layla and Shaw were admiring a beautiful view. Shaw called to the princess to get her attention and said they would do their best to produce a major invention to enrich the country. Farlin was a small town that also served as a state. Shaw had been stuck in the castle for just over half a month. He couldn't stand it anymore. Shaw lay awkwardly on the floor, his stomach grumbling with hunger, and he longed for Japanese food so much he wanted to cry, wishing with all his heart to eat miso soup and onigiri again. After a while, the man stepped outside into the castle market, where many stalls sold a wide variety of goods. At the market, the man looked for rice and miso, but found nothing like them, only barley, which was no substitute for rice. Shaw also noticed a wide selection of fish products at the market, indicating that drying and transporting fish are well developed here, except for nearby fish that stayed fresh because transport took a long time. Soy sauce is another essential part of Japanese cuisine. The cook wanted to find glutamate for its preparation. Soon Shaw stood in front of a seafood counter. The seller offered to help, and Shaw said he was looking for dried seagrass, which surprised the seller. The seller began searching through his stock. After a while, he pulled out the seagrass but wasn't sure it was the right item. The seagrass looked white and moldy, so the seller told Shaw he would throw it away since he couldn't sell it, but Shaw was stunned because it wasn't mold and was actually top quality that added flavor. He promptly told the seller he would take them, bought dried fish, asked for seagrass as a gift, and the seller gladly handed over the groceries. After a while, he held a huge bag of groceries, pleased with his shopping, and once home set the bag down and laid out cereals, vegetables, and other products. To open the show, I decided to try making a broth for a seaweed soup called kelp, using a recipe from my world. He remembered he had to cut the seaweed into small pieces and pour hot water over the kelp. Next, sprinkle a little salt on top to make instant soup. Once it was ready, the man eagerly tasted the soup he had prepared. The soup was amazing. He loved the aroma and delicious taste, and it tasted exactly like the kelp from his world. The soup's taste reminded Shaw of his mother. She was likely worried about his absence. Not sure his world had been preserved, he thought he might be the only one who lost consciousness from the shock when a light went out, and feeling sad from those thoughts, he started experimenting with food again. Shaw thought to use a water wheel from the workshop because it could power a barley mill. A mortar and pestle would cover his small needs, but it was hard and tiring, so he decided to mechanize the whole process. Using a water wheel, he made a machine to peel barley. He mechanized the large mortar so it cleaned the grain on its own, and soon he had clean, peeled barley. After receiving the peeled barley, Shaw cooked it, and when he tasted it, the cereal had a strange aroma but was delicious, though it was too dry to make tortillas. The next day, Shaw began an important task. It was his first time making miso in another world. Rubia eyed the enthusiastic man with suspicion. Shaw was up to something odd again and wanted to show his master a brilliant first step in the history of this world. Miso came from soybeans. The man found some, but they didn't look exactly like the soybeans from his world. You'll also need salt for the dish. She was easy to find in this world. Rice malt was needed too, but he didn't have rice, so he would use barley malt instead. It will be more like barley miso. Miso took a long time to cook, but there was a kind of magic to it, so making the dish would be easy. The man tackled the task with enthusiasm even if it did not work out. I could always try again. First, the man soaked the barley in water, then used magic to heat it. The microwave worked like magic. He also used it to heat the tools to at least 100 degrees. Either way, disinfection was crucial. If germs get in, it will fail immediately. After everything was done, the steamed barley was divided into small portions. The man used growth-stimulating magic on it. Something began to appear on the portions, and Ruby thought it was mold. The girl told him they could not eat the dish because of the mold. Shaw reassured her, explaining the yellow stain on the barley was not ordinary mold but sesame mold, and although miso sold in Japan uses a white mold, a mutation in this world has changed it. That should have been enough for that volume. Koji will be ready soon. After a while, the sorceress smelled a pleasant, sweet aroma from the cereal. As the aroma rose, Shaw and Rubia steamed and mashed the beans again in a magic microwave oven. Then they carefully mixed salt and barley malt by hand. They rolled them into balls. Ruby watched him suspiciously and still thought the dish would be inedible, but he assured her that if the fermentation worked, it would taste good. Next, they packed everything into a sterilized jar, then had to close it tightly with a lid. Shaw cast a spell to speed up the fermentation process. Maturation took about an hour with breaks. A man sat awkwardly on the floor while Rubia calmly sipped tea. Everyone waited for the cooking. Using magic, the man shortened the cooking time from about a year to 1 hour. An hour passed and the dish was ready. Shaw. He opened the jar and inhaled the pleasant aroma of cooked miso. The miso from another world was ready to eat. The man admired the dish with joy. Ruby still did not trust him because she had never heard of miso. Meanwhile, in the castle courtyard far away, a cat-eared maid named Nimue swept the yard and wondered about the pleasant scent drifting from Shaw's house. The man showed the woman the dish he had prepared, miso soup with pork. She had never heard of that soup, so he explained it was from his hometown and that he used kelp and dried fish for the broth. Shaw added potatoes, onions, and carrots to the miso soup, but couldn't find anything like radishes, and he also cooked barley rice and grilled the meat to serve with the miso. Soon the man served all the dishes on the table. A fragrant steam spread through the room. Shaw placed bamboo sticks beside the food. Now it felt like real Japanese food. He ate the food he had made with tears in his eyes. Each familiar bite carried the Japanese spirit. He urged Rubia to try the dishes, but she hesitated, a little afraid to taste unfamiliar food. Someone suddenly knocked on Shaw's door, and a voice called for Shaw. It was the new maid, and she asked what they were eating because the smell of food had drawn her. He offered the maid a taste of the food he'd prepared, and the girl who approached the table froze in shock. Nemu frowned at the unfamiliar food, thinking the man had used insect eggs because the barley looked like them, and she was alarmed by the miso soup's muddy appearance. Shaw told the girl he wasn't going to feed her something like that, and said it was only pork soup when Stella suddenly entered the room. An elf called out to Shaw. Princess Layla joined Stella in the room. The man greeted the girls. Stella felt very hungry. The two of them noticed the pleasant smell of food. He wasn't worried about uninvited guests because he cooked a lot of food, figured everyone would come for the pleasant smell, and offered them a taste even though he wasn't sure they'd like it. After a while, Nisimu tasted the food and beamed at the dishes. She began to eat greedily because it was so delicious. Rubia, watching the eager maid, wanted to try it too. Rubia tasted the soup and was surprised by its pleasant flavor. Stella could not understand why food that looked so unappetizing tasted so good. Princess Layla felt the same. Princess Layla noticed carrots in the soup. She had always hated carrots because they were too bitter, but when she tasted these carrots, she found them pleasant, which surprised her. The man told everyone the taste changed because of a process called alkali removal, and that kamado ashes are used to remove bitterness. The girls had never heard of those ashes before, and his abilities surprised them. After explaining how to remove the bitterness, the man gave Numi a plain carrot as an example, and the maid tasted it and found it unpleasantly bitter. After the demonstration, Shaw soaked the carrots in water and applied lye to them. Using magic, he sped up the alkali reaction on the carrots. Numi took a carrot from a plate of water, and after tasting it, was surprised to find only a pleasant vegetable taste. The bitterness had disappeared, and the maid thought it was magic. The man disagreed and said he was just using magic to speed the reaction, and even without it, they can soak carrots and lye overnight. Not knowing about the alkali removal, Stella was quietly surprised. The elf rose from the table and thanked the man for the delicious food. Having satisfied her hunger, Stella moved toward the man with lightning speed, making him blush. Seeing this, Numi watched them with interest and grew agitated. Her cat ears twitched with excitement. If Stella can do it in the show, Numi can too. Then Nemu jumped onto the guy. They knocked Shaw over on the bed. Stella and Nemu were lying on top of him. An elf said she'd been part of this threesome for a long time and that it was better when a rough man joined in. Nothing happened. Rubia, clutching her magic staff, stared at the man gloomily. He suddenly panicked and ran from the girls, and someone grabbed his hand. Princess Layla moved up to Shaw and hugged him. With a seductive gesture, she asked for something sweet after dinner. Shaw hesitated, his face flushing with embarrassment. Shaw cleared his head but did not understand what the girl was saying. Princess Leela was indignant. She meant something black and sweet, and Shaw realized she meant chocolate, but he had no chocolate left. Princess Layla will never forget the taste of chocolate. The memory of the dessert filled her with bliss. A man called out to the girl. He wanted to see if she could reach the sugar. His question angered Princess Layla. Sugar was precious, and taking any for herself would make her seem extravagant. She refused to be like greedy aristocrats. Angry, she pushed him away and told him she had responsibilities. Soon a sad cry came from her. The princess pretended to cry. If they had not sold all the new items, this might not have happened. Stella and Numi scolded the man for making the princess cry. Rubia watched in silence. Shaw looked confused by the whole situation. Princess Layla suddenly stopped crying, looked down at the man and ordered him to come up with something, and Shaw only had to obey and carry it out. She recalled his promise with a cheeky smile that he would handle the problem, and Shaw could not refuse now because he had given his word, and a promise made before royalty could not be undone. After a while, everyone left. By evening, the man sat alone in his house. Shaw was puzzled by the chocolate problem and did not know what to do, and the man considered replacing the sweetness with syrup. Malt sugar from barley was once used to make drinks, and it forms when germinating barley produces an enzyme that converts starch into sugar. Even if the show cheats by using syrup instead of chocolate, it will only be a matter of time before Princess Layla demands chocolate from him again. Cocoa did not exist in this world, and Shaw had never heard of it, so he was unsure whether any substitute existed. Suddenly he remembered he had read that in parts of South America, frying and eating a large spider would make it taste like chocolate, and that it was served as a treat there, so the dish should be delicious. Thinking it over, Shaw remembered being stung by a spider near a waterfall. He was nearly eliminated after that, so the guy worried he might use a spider. After a while, the guy opened his master's office door and called to Rubia. The sorceress was reading a magic scroll. He asked Rubia about the spider. She wanted to know if the spider lives near the waterfall, and Rubia said it does. That spider preys on animals that gather by the water, which is why spiders are so common near reservoirs. Shaw understood the girl's explanation. Ruby eyed the guy with suspicion, wanting to know what he was up to this time. Smiling, Shaw told his master he wanted to eat this spider, The sorceress looked at her pupil, Fajan, in disbelief. When asked again, he repeated that he wanted to eat the spider. Pale and covering her mouth, she fell silent for a moment in shock, then asked the guy if he even knew the spider's name. Shaw looked at the girl, confused, but she refused to tell him anything. Her reaction led the man to decide to eat the spider, and she warned him the spider had venom glands in its head and chest. The man went deep into the forest to catch the spider that dared to attack him. Shaw was eagerly searching for a spider. Once the main character, he was defeated by a slime at the start of the role-playing game, but now the show featured magic. Confident in his abilities, he went looking for a spider just for fun when a rustle appeared in the bushes. A spider like the one by the waterfall appeared in front of the man, but it was so huge it looked more like a crab than a spider. Shaw stared wearily at the spider that had appeared, since the one that bit him had been small by comparison. Destroying him would be easy, just warm it up with magic. He remembered the information about the crabs. When they are crushed, they give off an unpleasant smell, and the show doesn't like that. But this spider clearly resembled a crab, and there was even an urban legend about it. Instead of warming the spider, the guy decided to freeze it. Using magic, he easily defeated the spider. Otherwise, it would have been difficult, but Shaw froze it so it could not walk, then, laughing, grabbed the immobilized spider and put it in a bag. After a while, the man returned to the house. While in the forest, Shaw caught 3 large spiders, pulled them from his bag, and tied their legs with rope to immobilize them. Using magic, he heated them. Heating turned the spider's shell from chestnut to purple, and the man felt no appetite at the sight, but thought the spider was already edible. Shaw then separated the spider into its component parts. Shaw placed the poisonous parts in a separate bowl. The spider's gland contained paralytic venom. Shaw considered using it as an anesthetic. After removing the spider's poisonous parts, the black-haired man began to eat. Cracking open a limb shell revealed meat like king crab. Shaw didn't think it was poisonous, but he still looked at the meat wearily. Stumbling, he bit into the meat and loved the taste, finding it even better than crab meat, and Shaw now wanted crab fried rice. Calm down, the guy wasn't doing it just for crab-like meat. Shaw tasted the spider's belly fluid and found it bitter, like coffee. After a while, he returned to his master's office, told Rubia the chocolate was ready, and showed the girl a bowl of sweets that looked much better than cocoa chocolate. Horrified, she realized he had turned him into a spider, and her eyes widened. The man happily reached for this chocolate, but the girl screamed at him to stop. She did not want to see him eat it. Shaw frowned at her scream and at the girl. For Rubia, the chocolate should not be unpleasant just because it was made from a spider, and the girl, as a real scientist, had to check everything. Rubia, flushed with shame at his words, reluctantly raised the chocolate to her mouth and ate it quickly, and a second later her expression changed to delight as the chocolate tasted delicious. The chocolate tasted better than before. Rubia asked how the guy did it. Shaw said he started by using fluid from the spider's abdomen. A sorceress gasped in surprise. Then Shaw mixed the liquid with malt syrup and warmed it slightly to bring out the flavor, but the mixture was not rich enough, so he added milk fat. Made with fresh ingredients and plenty of cream and butter, this chocolate is tastier than the last store-bought version. Suddenly, the man noticed Rubia wasn't listening to his explanation because she was focused on eating the chocolate. As he left the master's office, the man warned her he was not yet convinced the product was safe and told her not to get carried away with chocolate. Shaw wanted to go to the princess to report on the chocolate's preparation. Soon the man stood in the throne room and told Layla he had made chocolate. The princess praised the gesture, and Nate Chocolate was carrying the chocolate to the princess. The princess asked about the ingredients because Shaw had said they were hard to find. Shaw said he had found a substitute, then took out a spider. Layla felt like fainting from horror. The maids arrived just in time and stopped her from falling. The man finally learned the spider's name. The angry princess wanted to know why he was purple. Medicines were often made from parts of animals and monsters. The princess hesitated, but Rumenes came to arrest you, and a maid volunteered to be the first to taste this chocolate. Rumenes tasted it, loved the sweet, rich flavor, and couldn't stop eating it. Layla was pleased and wanted to try it too. Suddenly something happened to Rumenes. The girl went pale and covered her mouth, and everyone in the maze was frightened by the abrupt change. The man picked up the fallen Rumenes. Everyone worried about the maid's well-being. Rumenes leaned against him with a seductive figure. She asked him to just call her Rumi. Shaw, blushing, stared at her, stunned. Breathing heavily, the girl blushed and spoke to Sean in a seductive, submissive voice. The man understood the whole situation. Rushing from the throne room, he went to his master, leaving the girls alone. He hoped that, even if the chocolate was poisoned, Magister Rubio could handle it with magic. The man soon reached the girl's office, called for the master in a worried voice, and found the girl already lying on the floor. Panting, she was in the same condition as Rumenesis. Her gaze on the man was sultry. The chocolate effect had flushed every part of her body a seductive red. Seeing the sorceress made Shaw's nose bleed. Still breathing heavily, the girl could not believe he had forced her to eat it. Her scream echoed throughout the castle. She called him a fool. After a while, the man found himself back in the throne room. The chocolate he made had an intense effect. The effect would be so strong that even the master would be defeated by him. The mark on his cheek proved it. Princess Layla was delighted and wanted to begin mass production of the chocolate immediately, while the man reacted with shock because he thought it was dangerous. The princess was sure that, because of chocolate's effect, many people would pay a fortune for it, especially if there was no antidote. After some time in the artisan's workshop, Russell enjoyed the cooked spider. A man has been watching spiders since childhood and couldn't believe he'd missed out on such a delicious dish for decades. The man praised the guy who thought to use the spider for food. It was a real masterstroke now that they knew how to make chocolate. They should prepare for mass production. The man told him that he'd recently felt they were at a turning point. It was a turning point. A ladder had suddenly appeared on an empty plain. The man did not know whether it led to heaven or hell. The artisan appreciated the man's words and believed the center of the world would be in Farthakling. No one else had an invention like theirs. Shaw was glad they appreciated it. They still had many obstacles to overcome. Russell didn't understand what the man meant. Shaw told him their biggest problem was fuel because they needed it to build the invention and spread it around the world, but they only had firewood and coal. Obtaining good coal for iron production was difficult, and the city's growing population alone will cause a fuel shortage. Cutting down the trees in Farlane's forests would provide plenty of firewood, but it would not solve the problem. When a forest is cut down, it can take hundreds of years to return to its original state. Cutting down trees can also cause desertification. This is how cities in the show's world sank into the sand. Also, he had heard the forest had shrunk a lot since Princess Layla was a child. The trees were cut down for fuel, but it does not get very cold on Far Lane in winter, so they are not used for heating. The trees provided wood for daily cooking and to light the bathhouse fire. Charcoal was used as fuel in the forge. All of this came from the forest. If the city continues to develop, its population will grow. Firewood and charcoal use will increase rapidly. Coal or oil would be useful in this world, but nobody has even heard of them. The artisan knew cutting down trees was harmful, yet he dismissed the place as just a forest. Shaw disagreed. Forests make fertile farmland, fresh water, reliable rainfall, and a stable climate possible, and they act as huge reservoirs that store water for people to use. Chasing short-term money can destroy your country. Shaw's words surprised the men. The black-haired man was thinking about the future. After a while, Shaw climbed to the top of the tower and stood alone, taking in Farlane's view. The place relaxed him, and he pulled his phone from the inside pocket of his jacket. Holding the phone, the man wanted to take a photo of the beautiful view of Far Lane and was sure it would work, but the phone was dead. The man thought about coal, oil, and electricity. Those energy sources had to exist for him. Then he had an idea. He wanted to create something magical so the show could get energy. The next day came, he clapped his hands in joy, had an idea he wanted to try, and the show eagerly used magic because he could not resist testing ideas. Shaw was casting a drainage spell on the stream beside the workshop. It was an artificial flow from a windmill. Initially, he planned to set up a garden, but that would lower the air pressure. At a place thick with water vapor, he prepared a spell to lower the pressure, and the flowing magic made the air move. Soon the sky darkened and lightning appeared. The man enjoyed it at first, then came to his senses and removed the magic. Shaw had gotten too carried away. It could get pretty dangerous. After a while, the man drove an iron rod into the ground. He realized he should have been more careful. Back inside the house, Shaw used magic again, and clouds and lightning immediately appeared in the sky. The lightning headed toward the iron rod, and Shaw finally summoned a strike using magic and a dick. A tall column of cloud can be charged in about a minute. The magic reaches about 100 meters, and the man could not have done more than that. Shaw walked to the impact site and noticed a sharp smell of ozone that he thought could be harmful. A strong current could work for the show. Creating a narrow T-shaped channel and running a strong current through it would make this possible. As the man made a T-shaped pillar, Ruminus suddenly approached him. Shaw saw a girl in the doorway of his house. The maid told him Nemo had heard thunder and was very scared, so she came to check. The man realized he was at fault. He told her he'd been experimenting with magic. Then the guy and the girl went outside. This will be his last experiment. Ruminese was worried about his actions. Shaw explained he would do it so lightning would strike the iron bars and melt them. After the explanation, Shaw cast the thunderbolt spell. His magic required no words, but a beautiful girl watched him. As someone who once loved flashy displays, he could not just stand there. Shaw then summoned lightning successfully. Rumides gave a frightened scream and covered her ears, stunned by it all. A man approaching the iron bars realized he had succeeded. If he could control lightning, he could melt at will. Soon a fierce hail began, and Layla angrily told the man not to use lightning inside the castle because Shaw could have destroyed it, so he was forbidden from experimenting with lightning bolts there. Frustrated that he couldn't do a quick magic experiment, Shaw thought that might explain why the master went to live in the forest. A man had experiments he wanted to try, so he had to prepare. Shaw made a plate with a hole that would gradually get smaller. The craftsman inserted a copper rod hammered out in the forge into the plate. Copper is soft and stretchable, so feeding it through the hole gradually reduced its diameter. Shaw couldn't believe such a thin, twisted wire was made by hand, but it was good enough for him. The wire had to be burned to soften it, and he did that with magic. The shell meant to prevent a short circuit caused the problem. Vinyl did not exist in that world, so he wrapped it in paper coated with a mix of nakava and oil. Shaw heard paper wrapping is better than vinyl, but I wasn't sure if that was true. Wrapping the thin leather around the forged rod, he wound a copper wire on top and got a real one. The different number of turns might have mattered, but it was still an experiment. The next day the man encountered Numi on the road. She was hiding in the shadow of a pillar. Scared, she asked him about the thunder. Shaw told the girl everything was fine. The princess banned experiments in the castle, so he went to the forest. Numi understood this and timidly told him that, despite Shaw's kindness, the girl still feared him. The man asked the woman whether the maid not only cared for the princess, but also protected her, and she agreed. The man then gave an example of what she would do if lightning appeared, and Numi would have to convey an important message about the attacking bandits using lightning magic. Numi was upset because if the girl got scared and ran away, she would lose her job, and she did not like it. The girl didn't know what to do, so Shaw invited Numi to watch experiments with lightning magic to help her get used to it, and she timidly agreed to his proposal. They needed a roomy place, preferably by a river. Nim screamed from behind the show's master because she couldn't keep up with him. He claimed he was so fast because he had cast a weight loss spell on himself. Only Nim could reach that speed without magic, and the beastmen were truly impressive. They had to tie the coil to a wooden pole, then pull one end of the copper wire up and stick the other end into the ground to slow it down. Shaw immediately told the girl to keep her head down. Unlike magic you can aim and fire, this magic mimics natural phenomena and cannot be controlled, and to be honest you can never know where it will hit. They have to keep their distance because the magic can hit them directly if they are not careful. At last, the magic lightning appeared, and the others shouted that it was already starting. Lightning struck the pre-prepared coil directly, and the Nim screamed loudly. Shaw cheered loudly that their plan had worked, and it seemed lightning had struck the very edge of reality. The homemade coil ignited violently and then caught fire, which Noom also noticed, and Nim shouted in fear that their coil was burning while trying to get the show's master to see it too. The master ran at once, knowing how dangerous it was. If a fire broke out here, it would be a total disaster. This world had no way to fight fires, so a blaze could destroy the whole kingdom. Shaw saw the fire starting to spread into the undergrowth. The man hesitated and tried cooling magic, but quickly realized it would not be enough and began looking for a way to put the fire out. He suddenly thought to create a vacuum to cut off access to oxygen. The coil went out and began to smoke, and Shaw exhaled, saying they almost set the forest on fire. Nim said sadly that she was still afraid of thunder. The master turned and said calmly that Nim would soon get used to it. The fire was out, but the man couldn't tell if their experiment had succeeded. Shaw drew his sword from its scabbard, examined the metal on the coil while glancing at the blade, and threw the metal from the coil into the sword. The master announced that he had succeeded. It turned out a piece from the coil had become a magnet, and she became magnetized to the steel part of the sword. The magnet was weak, looked like a stack of 100 magnets, and lost its magnetism quickly, so he realized steel cannot become a permanent magnet and found that unfortunate. After thinking, Shaw realized he now knew how to make magnets. Nim stood behind him, hoping he would be okay and feeling it had all been for nothing. The master turned, laughed, and said everything was fine. The more they failed, the closer they would get to success. The magnets failed, but Shaw realized that magic, depending on the combination, could still achieve a lot, and that was already a good result. This may not be as impressive as spoken magic, but do not underestimate magic, especially at an early stage. The girl told the guy that now that they had burned it all, they could go back to the castle and have lunch. Walking toward the castle, they were glad they'd be able to eat soon, By now they had reached the shops and were wandering between them. The woman handed the show to Pico, who thanked her. A simple compass existed here, and he was certain a natural stone did as well, but obtaining it would be difficult even with the queen's funds. If Shaw has cobalt or neodymium, he can make a powerful magnet, but he didn't know where to find them or how to refine them, and iron and platinum alloys are also available. Shaw Googled it in the past world. He had heard that platinum alloys were used as powerful magnets in high-end audio equipment before neodymium magnets were invented. The man thought about platinum and remembered that their world also has gold, silver, and copper. Shaw had never heard of platinum here, and he didn't even know she existed in this world. I hope he finds out about it later. If he has magnets and coils, he can build a motor, and with a motor he can make a generator. Connecting to that generator lets you do arc welding for now, not lightning welding. Shaw couldn't wait because controlled welding would expand the range of actions and objects. Screams suddenly rang out from the alley as someone begged to be moved away from him, and Shaw couldn't tell what the noise was, even thinking it was a fight. 3 men stood in the alley with a girl who was loudly threatened and told she was finished. Annoyed, the girl drew her sword. Her look was striking, with 2 tails on her head and gloves on her hands. Shaw realized she was Her Majesty's bodyguard. Watching them, Shaw couldn't understand why 3 men would insult the girl like that. One of the bullies said if she had stayed quiet, no one would have been hurt. Shaw thought this was Mizuki, or rather Her Highness's bodyguard, a man who did not know what to do. Wishing her gone, the man in the raincoat insulted the girl and called her a royal servant. The girl remained silent and held the hilt of her sword tightly. A few weeks ago, the queen addressed Mizuki and introduced her to the show, or rather to the inventor of the new carriages, and the girl introduced herself to the guy, the wanderer, explaining how Mizuki felt about riding in a carriage. She said it was great, though she usually gets very tired after a carriage ride, and this one is so comfortable she can easily fall asleep. Mizuki was sure everyone would want one. Shaw pointed out one drawback of the carriage. More precisely, it bounces on the same series of uneven surfaces. He wanted a softer material for the wheels but could not find it, since he planned to build a carriage that did not need a horse, which surprised the queen. The queen laughed and said this is what a true master looks like. If they make such a model, they could sell it and make a profit. Shaw agreed awkwardly. Mizuki paused and turned to Her Majesty and the show's master when she saw they were getting along well. The queen laughed and said she was right because he was her chief specialist. Shaw contacted Ms. Mizuki because they both had official business. He thought she would be willing to tell them more about her impressions of the trip, and she agreed. They walked down a long corridor. He realized she was from the Great K-Mode Empire. She immediately confirmed it and began to explain. The Great K-Mode Empire is a major power located east of the Far Strip. If the Far Strip is west, the empire was likely in the east. Shaw did not understand why he had left his country. Mizuki felt puzzled and tried to work out how to explain it to her. The man realized he had made a mistake, apologized, and asked for forgiveness since it was rude and they had only just met. Mizuki told him not to worry because they'd met before. She had accompanied Her Highness to Rubia, and Shaw was very surprised by the news. Embarrassed and blushing, he hesitated a little and turned to Mrs. Mizuki because he hoped she wouldn't mind him looking at the sword on her belt, since his unusual shape made him very curious. Zuki said he could take a look, of course, but it wasn't a sacred sword or anything like that. This sword was fighting another sword, and Shaw's mouth fell open in surprise. The girl was stronger than the attacker, who clung on with the last of his strength. A man watched them, mouth still open. He was trying to figure out how to help her, knowing that no matter how skilled a swordsman she was, Mizuki wouldn't be able to fight 3 people at the same time. Suddenly, the sword flashed with wild speed. Opening her mouth in surprise, the girl saw drops of blood appear on the street's stone tiles where she might be injured. Unable to watch any longer, Shaw called the girl by name and warned that she was about to be attacked from behind. A ball appeared in the man's hand, spun, and blinded 3 men. They shielded themselves from the light to hide. Shaw stood there angry, a bright light shining from him. Mizuki finally noticed him, and the other men also turned to him, remembering he was a scientist. A bearded man shouted to the others that they had to run. Shaw and Mizuki watched the men walk away in silence. The man stood drenched in cold sweat. He had tricked them with air compression magic, but he clearly couldn't stand in battle. Snapping out of his thoughts, he immediately sat down beside Mrs. Mizuka to make sure she was all right. The girl's shoulder was injured. She clung to him to stop the bleeding. Shaw shouted that she was bleeding. He realized he had to stop him immediately. They leaned against the wall while Shaw bandaged her wound, tucking a twig under the dressing, and he gave first aid. Scooping Mizuki into his arms, he shouted that they had to get back to the castle right away because the master definitely had healing spells. They had already arrived at the master's house. Mizuki lay on the mattress and felt unwell. The doctor refused to treat her. Shaw didn't understand and had already started begging Stella, since the master had gone to collect plants, and she was the only person he could ask. But when he asked Trudy, the girl angrily said she did not work here as a doctor. Unable to persuade Stella, he asked her to help Mizuki somehow, since if no one does anything for Mizuki, she will disappear. Shaw pleaded with her nearly in tears. Stella stared at him without speaking, then laid out her terms. He had to spend the night with her, and only then would she consider it. He agreed, saying he'd do it and anything else. Stella felt he assumed she would accept such a forced promise, but she had her own pride as a woman. Shaw apologized, ready for anything. Stella chuckled and went to the injured Mizuki. She sat beside the wounded girl and began a healing spell to restore her. Mizuki's wound began to heal right away and soon disappeared completely, and when she woke she apologized to Lady Stella for the trouble she'd caused, saying the bleeding had stopped but would start again if she moved. Stella left, saying she did not care what would happen to the Empire's inhabitants. Mizuki grew agitated and tried to speak to her, but Shaw could not understand why the girl hated them so much or whether she had any reason for it. Shaw hoped she would be okay. The girl nodded and thanked him for saving her life. He insisted he hadn't done anything, saying he only helps when she has problems, and Mizuki was silent for a moment before calling him a kind person. Peeling an apple, Shaw realized he was seeing Stella's healing magic for the first time. The moment she began to cast the spell, the wound healed instantly. Lost in thought, he did not notice he was peeling an apple, cried out when he cut his finger, and then wondered if his magic could heal it too. Shaw put a small wounded finger in his mouth, and thought again that the human body is a mass of chemical reactions, imagining they could use reaction-promoting magic or the growth-promoting magic humans use for plants. Monsters rarely attack, but across all worlds people are the hardest to regenerate. Especially since all kinds of ragamuffins can attack, Shaw would like to learn basic attack and healing magic so he can defend himself. The man pulled his finger from his mouth, moved the knife closer, and ran it along his wound again. Droplets of blood began to fall onto the table where he had just been carefully peeling apples. At first glance he may seem insane and even possessed by the spirit of real science, because the magic promotes growth and will stimulate the skin to close the wound. The guy looked at the finger and grew annoyed when he realized it was getting worse, the wound deeper than before and bleeding much more. Using magic to speed reactions seemed necessary, and he assumed the skin's healing processes were just chemical reactions, but that approach failed again, showing not everything was as simple as it seemed. He used double activation magic to run accelerated growth and accelerated reaction at the same time, and the wound began to heal. Double activation of magic demands intense concentration, like holding several conversations at once while still tracking each topic. Blood kept flowing from the wound no matter how hard he tried, and it started to annoy him, so he used magic again and sweat appeared on his face from the effort. Finally, his wound had healed completely, leaving a thin streak and a drop of blood from the once large wound, and Shaw said loudly that he had succeeded. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled loudly. He was so focused he had forgotten to breathe, but he breathed anyway. Shaw can only use mental magic, but if he keeps figuring it out, his powers will grow significantly. The magic of spells is like a program that activates several spells and then combines them effectively, but he did not understand when it stops being regenerative. If you cast magic on meat, it won't turn back into a cow, won't increase in quantity, won't act as fertilizer, and won't rot. Magic only closes wounds. It borrows vitality ahead of time to speed healing. Shaw ensured the flesh could not regenerate because there was no life force to borrow while watching the freshly fried remains. When the heart stops beating, blood flow and oxygen stop, and once a cell's energy is used up, it can no longer regenerate. Animals can't regenerate quickly, but plants are resilient. Even cut into small pieces, they can still sprout, and vegetables can regrow from fruits left forgotten in the refrigerator. Finishing his steak, the man realized that some plants were being cloned to preserve their quality. Suddenly he sprang up from his chair and set his hands on the table. Then he went into his greenhouse to inspect his flowers. A single flower caught his eye, a vanilla seed orchid. Shaw received seedlings from a master and grew them into vanilla beans, and when he learned that orchids are commonly cloned, he thought he could do the same by magically inducing excessive tissue regeneration. Realizing he had to try it, he took a leaf and cut it into small pieces. Cut the leaf and place it in a sterilized plate of water, activate the magic, and let the leaf tissues multiply. Arrange the leaf pieces so they are evenly spaced in the water, and note that cells from an overgrown leaf can soon form a white mass. New shoots appeared from the leaf, and soon a large new leaf unfolded from them. The man said happily that it had regenerated. This would let him clone and propagate any valuable plant and collect as many vanilla beans as he wanted, and then, like an evil genius, he laughed aloud. Laughing loudly, he eventually lost consciousness and collapsed on the spot, apparently after overusing his magic. After a while he was back home, looking at a small detail when someone spoke to him, and it was her, so he turned to look because he hadn't expected to see her. She realized he was doing something amazing again. Shaw looked at her and said he was just thinking random nonsense. He wondered what had happened and felt it was something good. Nim asked Mr. Shaw again because she wanted him to come to Onion Coppin. Mr. Shaw had no idea what kind of coppin he was. The girl said it was a very fluffy, cheerful place that smelled pleasant. Sean and Nim walked down a quiet street in their town, with few people around. The man turned to her to figure out what she meant. It's fluffy and smells delicious. Nim said her mom had opened a store. The man looked surprised and asked about the store again. They arrived at a house, and Nim said the shop was right here on Cognan Kapon, the Beast's snack bar. The doorbell rang loudly, announcing new visitors, and the diner was already crowded with customers happily chatting and drinking. Nim explained that all the visitors were beastmen and hoped it would not be a problem since Shaw was not one, and the girl turned to Mr. Shaw and said they were all glad to see him. Nim's mother Ninny immediately said she was very glad to see him, since she had heard so much from him about being a master scientist. She said she was his mother, and the man introduced himself as Shaw, adding that he was only the master's student because he did not yet have a certificate. He heard that to get an official certificate proving he is a true master, he must enroll in the Imperial University, but he isn't interested because it wouldn't change what he does. Patrons in the diner noticed that someone who looked like him had appeared beside them, or rather, the true master. The man heard their exclamations and did not understand their teasing or why they were so interested in him. Ninny handed over a plate of food and said their specialty was meatball soup. Without hesitation, the man scooped up one spoonful and said it tasted very good and the broth was excellent. The girl said the fish used to make the broth is stewed whole and spices are added to remove the smell, making the meat taste richer and more flavorful. Nim said she had told her mom about the soup the show's master was cooking for them. The man realized they had adapted it to the animal's taste. Nim laughed at him and said it tasted very good. A hand touched the man's shoulder, and he turned to Mr. Shaw. Many cat girls clustered around him, and he couldn't figure out what was happening. Shaw believed they were the same species as him. One girl agreed, and the other said she wanted to get closer to the show's master. The man began to think they were interested in scientists, but he doubted that was true. The blonde cat girl said there are rumors in the city that the show's master is a demon. The man couldn't figure out how that had happened. The girls added that he is the true master who invented spider chocolate. Shaw tried to recall the spider chocolate. After that single case, it was successfully produced and secretly sold to us as a tonic and nutritional supplement during and after illness. A merchant quietly mentioned other effects, saying it also works for something else and will make all the girls yours. Despite the vulgar advertisement, the product is selling with rather enthusiastic reviews. The cat girl said Nim said the master of the show was kind. The master of the show invented the pump, uses it every day, and now her work is much easier. The man said he was glad to hear that because he had worked for his master and knew pumping water from a well was very hard. She kept saying that but still had no idea why water was leaking from the pump. Someone else agreed it was strange. The girl turned to the show's master to see if he would do something even more amazing. Nim interrupted the conversation to say the show's master was planning a wagon that did not need horses, and it was a secret development. The girls could not understand how a carriage could travel without a horse, and they suggested she ride by magic. He said no, it's not magic at all, it's just logic. She was a little surprised, and he immediately confirmed it. He decided to give an example, saying he had made a toy as he showed it. The catgirls did not understand what it was, but the show asked to see it. This toy car had a bouncing wheel. It stores kinetic energy in the heavy bouncing wheel, so when you take your hand away, it keeps going. The machine stores energy in its hands, but here it has an engine running instead and the car has 2 wheels instead of 4, so I wondered how it would move. Then he launched it across the floor. Letting go of his hand, he said it drives like this, and his invention rolled across the floor, immediately drawing the girls' attention. Catgirls immediately rushed to the typewriter, which surprised the guy, and the girls began destroying the whole room and jumping under the tables. Tastes, they were trying to catch a car. Shaw moved over to the girls to calm them, and Ninny came into the hall because she didn't understand what was happening. The cat sat awkwardly for a while and said their bodies acted on their own. Nini said that's why they don't work. Shaw didn't understand what she was talking about. She warned they couldn't do their job if they kept jumping on people, and that if a rat jumped out from the side and distracted them while they were on guard, they would get hit. Shaw remembered something and said Nim hadn't attacked me and had just wagged her tail. Nini said it was all because of her training and that she was proud of her. Later, walking past the shops with him, Shaw thought he might buy spices too, so they went to the shopkeeper, and Shaw said the store had an unusual selection, and the merchant turned to the buyer. I thought he was an expert and wanted to be sure. He also said he had rare ores. Then he handed Shaw a stone and said it only looked ordinary because Shaw believed it did. That was not the case. When he held it close to the blade, the ore instantly clung to the sword, and Shaw realized it was a natural magnet and became interested, since it was so rare it was not worth a single gold coin. He announced he would buy it. The merchant, stunned by how quickly they decided, asked them to wait because he could not believe they were buying it. Shaw thought she was not for sale because he wanted to buy her. The merchant apologized, saying he didn't expect anyone to spend that much on it. He added he would accept something else. Among the many items, he pointed to dried slime. A nearby sign called them hinterland delicacies. Nim was surprised by his choice, but he was already paying. The others had already visited the show's workshop. Nim decided to speak to its master since she had bought so much here, and the man unwrapping a bag looked surprised. He remembered he wanted to cook something, and once everything was ready he offered to make something to eat. The girl agreed happily. Many gear-like parts lay on the table, and when the man turned around he found Nim sleeping peacefully on the bed, so he kept working. At last the man said loudly that everything was ready. He brought a whipping wheel, or rather a hand mixer. It works like a toy car. Turn the handle to store energy in the jumping flywheel. The flywheel's inertia keeps the whisk turning after you let go. Nim woke up confused about what she was doing. Shaw noticed she was awake and said he mixes egg whites to make meringue. The word was new to her and she did not know what it meant. The girl was amazed it became so fluffy in an instant. It was white, fluffy, and delicious. The man suggested making it fluffy too. Cream separated from milk by centrifugation sat on the table and can be easily whipped with a hand mixer. Confused about the slime, the girl turned to the show's host because the mucus is poisonous. The man said only the organs were dangerous. The transparent part was not poisonous, and she looked like a jellyfish. Put it back in hot water and let it cool, then it will harden like a cardboard jelly. When you mix the meringue from the return slime with whipped cream and syrup and flavor it with vanilla beans, the semi-frozen slime will look like natto, and they were also going to add it to emphasize the taste. Pour the mixture into a bowl to cool, and today's appetizer, natto's otherworldly slime mousse, is ready. Suddenly the door opened and Stella and Rubia entered. The healer asked Shaw to bring her something sweet. The man said right away it was almost ready and they could take it, assuming they thought this place was some kind of coffee shop. The three girls immediately began tasting the new dish, but they couldn't tell what it was. The cake was cool and delicious. Its fluffy, soft interior and crispy crust were delightful. Shaw said the cake is called a mousse, then hesitated about its main ingredient and fell silent. He revealed the main ingredient was mucus. The girls were shocked by the recipe's secret and were not sure they meant the same slime. Unfortunately, the guy has never seen her in person. Stella said they fed it to her because it's considered a delicacy, but she didn't find it very tasty. Shaw said he was glad they liked her. Rubio was so shocked she did not move. Stella said it was a negative reaction. The girl did not seem to be breathing, but there was still mousse in her spoon. Stella said Rubia is a bit biased about food and has one clear prejudice, and Shaw laughed awkwardly and agreed. After all, when she finds a rare fish, vegetable, or dish, she asks herself whether she can eat it. Shaw wants them to learn from the Japanese, who eat everything in the world. Stella couldn't tell what the smell was because it didn't look like slime, so she realized it was a vanilla bean, though the man said it was an orchid fragrance. The girl remembered that she used it for incense. Shaw immediately turned to Mrs. Stella and suggested she make perfume out of him. Mrs. Stella asked in surprise. He suggested dissolving the perfume in a suitable alcohol and putting it into a small bottle so they can enjoy the fragrance whenever they want. Stella immediately threw her arms around his neck and tried to kiss him, but Rubelia woke and turned to Shaw, surprising him, so he looked at her, relieved she was alive. At first she denied it but said that if he made perfume for her, then he would forgive him. The next day there were screams in the workshop aimed at the show. Someone said he was terrible. The man immediately realized she was talking about Stella's perfume and had heard Stella was very pleased with them. The evil queen confirmed this, and Shaw quickly said he had arranged to have some made for her highness as well. She breathed directly into a strand of her hair, hoping he would think it smelled sweet and delicious, and he confirmed by saying it smells good and calling her Your Highness. She told him he could call her Leela. He looked embarrassed and said he couldn't just use her first name. Noticing others watching, she understood and puffed out her cheeks strongly, either from embarrassment or resentment. Shaw knew how she felt because he felt detached too, especially when people called him master or true master. When they were alone, he would call her Leela. He wanted to make sure it would work. Layla immediately said it was fine and agreed. Shaw then remembered something and turned to Layla. She didn't know what it was. He asked if the chocolates were selling well. The girl said they were very popular. In the market, each spider chocolate bar costs 2 gold coins, and rumors say large merchants, royals, and nobles are buying them up quickly. People don't talk about it, but some even disappeared from overeating these chocolates. The man repeated it, embarrassed. He doubted it was normal for Leela to say he had nothing to worry about. Every old man and pig on his list of people he wanted to destroy had already gone to hell. Perhaps that's been his aim all along, Shaw admitted sheepishly. He hadn't expected such an effect. Leela said he was simply lovely, then jumped into his arms and laughed. He thought she looked like a nice girl, but she wouldn't hesitate to do dark things. Her political skill was almost unimaginable. Shaw couldn't stop sweating. For several months, the show has been in another world, and he has learned a few things. Civilization here has remained in its present state for over 1,000 years. If we assume this world's civilization is at a level similar to the Edo period, it could still develop to modern Japan's level in just over 100 years. Useful magic may be one reason. Its existence keeps science from developing, and they do not even have matches to light a fire, much less electricity. Some magic stones, when charged with power, ignite on impact, but they are very expensive, so ordinary people who don't know magic find it hard to light candles. Shaw figured he could make a simple generator from a natural magnet he bought the other day from a traveling merchant, but it wasn't strong enough to charge a phone, though in his world it could light a bulb. The man started thinking about the light bulb. Glass existed in that world, but it was unsuitable for bulbs because its high impurity content made it cloudy. He realized he would have to make the right glass himself. Shaw searched for the right materials. Quartz is the raw material for glass and is plentiful along riverbanks. Recreating that kind of glass will be difficult because it depended on chemicals used in the original world. Some old crystal glasses, he believes, were made with wood ash. Shaw read that the more lead a material contains, the more transparent it becomes, so he thought the scintillator in a heavy detector could be glass, and if it contained lead he knew, it would be in the castle's materials department. Inside his house, Shaw sat at the table again, the sounds of effort coming from him as he worked on his creation, a crucible for melting glass cut from a larger piece of quartz. Now he needed ashes and a large supply of firewood. Melt in a large pot of magically heated water until saturated. Begin with a sedimentary liquid, speed up the reaction with magic, and get a white powder. It will be potassium. It was potash, but the name didn't matter. Quartz had to be crushed so it would dissolve more easily. He replaced his mortar and pestle for grinding wheat with metal ones so the water wheel could crush the wheat automatically. By using magic to repeat heating and cooling, he found quartz breaks into small pieces. Once again, he realized that magic could do much more when used properly, and that it could improve work efficiency. Place quartz shell and light into a crucible, then put the crucible in the oven. Lead would melt first, but quartz seemed unlikely to melt because glass has a much higher melting point, and the blacksmith's furnace was not powerful enough. He reinforced it with magical heat, accelerating molecular vibrations to raise the temperature. The quartz begins to melt and glows with an orange light, and after melting, it is poured onto a steel plate. You need to crush and stretch it using weight gain magic. This is the downside of weight-reducing magic. After it cooled down, he was puzzled to see some lead still left, and Shaw realized it had not completely melted. After several tries, he finally understood. Only the lead that yellowed from the heat had melted properly, so only the first part needs to be heated. Only the pieces that turned yellow will be selected. They ran another trial production. He started draining the liquid from the glass. Pausing to think about what had happened, he finally smiled because he had done it and now had a clear glass. It has a few impurities and is a little uneven, but it's usable. He thought it could be turned into window glass or even simple dishes. Usually glass cools and hardens quickly, so it must be shaped fast, but with magic he can keep it at the right temperature. Glass has so many uses that a special oven would be useful, and making something original appealed to him. Remembering he needed a light bulb next, he decided to try glass blowing. They use a mixture of iron and bamboo castor oil for blowing. He placed the glass mixture in the oven, twisted a bamboo stick, and blew into the center of the tube. Shaw spent several days making glass. When the unfinished light bulb began to melt, he realized how difficult it was to make. He tried to figure out how to blow into it properly and thought it was a matter of adding and subtracting. The man started blowing into the tube again to try to make a light bulb. The sun set. He spent several days making glass, and Stella and Rubia did not understand what it was. Stella looked at her reflection and felt unsettled because an elf was staring back at her. Ruby turned to the show, unsure what kind of boards they were, and noticed the glasses over there looked like invisible protection. Shaw rounded the corner and found Master and Mistress Stella, and explained that he had slightly improved the glass. He also explained it was a glass mirror, and they could see themselves perfectly. Stella was completely shocked to realize it was her. Shaw said they arrived just in time because he wanted to talk to them about something. The man held out a rolled-up wire and was about to say it was copper, but Rubia already knew. The man confirmed it and wanted to put a thin film on it after wrapping it in paper proved too thick. Rubia thought he might try Nikawa because bending the line with it makes it peel off. Stella then suggested using insect wax instead. Shaw asked again, but Rubia thought it might work, so she told him to get ready because they were going into the woods after him. He had not expected them to go now. The man knew it because the master was a real scientist. Ruby said they had to hurry. The insect wax was the same as in his old world, and when the copper wire passed through the molten insect wax, a good film formed on it, and thanks to the master and Mrs. Stella, he had a good reel. The problem was the thread. He couldn't get tungsten, which served as the material. The carbon filament is made by steaming finely planed bamboo. Early incandescent lamps, also called Edison bulbs, used bamboo for the film. Stella believed it was the vacuum's magic. The man agreed, and the woman asked what he was doing. The man said it was a lamp. The girls couldn't believe it. The copper wire wrapped around it is called a coil, and putting a natural magnet into or out of the coil makes it light. When he put a magnet to the coil, the lamp lit up and everything happened just as he said. Rubio was surprised she was actually glowing, and Stella did not understand why this was happening. The man explained that placing a magnet inside a coil creates a force like electricity that makes the lamp glow. Rubio realized it wasn't magic. He confirmed the idea and said anyone can use this theory. By combining it with a water wheel or a windmill and adding a mechanism to keep it running all the time, the lamps could glow even brighter. Stella said there was a problem. The sudden clearing of the darkness felt awkward. Shaw blushed, faced Mrs. Stella and asked her not to embarrass him, and while he tried to get rid of the intrusive girl, he knocked the magnets off the board. A pentagon-shaped stone fell onto a tablet with a lamp. Shaw couldn't believe it. The light bulb was on even though there was no magnet on the coil. Shaw discovered that holding the magic stone to the spiral made the light bulb glow. The stone showed electromagnetic induction. He was amazed, and that was how he enjoyed the other world. Rubia was amazed by the bulb's beautiful glow. Stella wondered whether it was the same force as an electric shock. Shaw had heard that magic stones could hold and release magical power. He did not think the magic stone could produce electricity. A magnet has to be moved continuously inside the coil, while a magic stone creates a magnetic field just by being nearby. Turning to the master, Shaw assumed magic stones wear out with constant use, but the girl said she had never heard of that. He was astonished that it was completely pollution-free, inexhaustible electrical energy. If he had discovered something like it in his world, he would already have received the Nobel Prize. At the castle, Shaw was already talking with Layla about a new invention, and the queen was pleased to see the man in his kingdom and curious about what he had done this time. But the man was serious and turning to the girl said, "Your Highness, it could be sold." They were now walking through the basement, and Layla did not know what they were going to do here. Shaw told her to hold it tight while she clutched an object she didn't recognize, then said they were going to put the magic stone down now. She already held something like a lantern that lit part of the basement, and she thought it was cool and believed it was magic. Shaw denied it and called it a trick of logic. A polished copper plate with a tin reflector is fitted into the bamboo tube. A coil is placed inside and connected to a light bulb, and when a magic stone is placed in the tube, electricity appears. The girl held the light to her face and said it was great because she would no longer have to struggle to light a candle. Shaw added it would also come in handy when Layla needs to pee in the middle of the night. The queen immediately said it would be for sale and that mass production had to start at once. The man said he would like to do it, but there was something he needed, and the woman waited to hear what he would say. To make this luminous part, he must use crystal glass and magic to create a vacuum. This glass takes a lot of fuel to produce. He will set up mass production, but you will have to wait a bit. With her face full of joy and enthusiasm, the girl said she would leave it to him. Shaw walked through the city when a woman greeted him, called him Mr. Scientist, and he said it was a beautiful day. On the way, he met a man who, seeing he was a master, was shopping, and the man confirmed it and said the newest and best swords were here. Looking at his sword, he said he forged it himself from scraps he bought the other day, claimed to be a true master, but admitted he could not do everything alone, since only dwarves can forge such swords. The merchant said he would appreciate Shaw visiting him from time to time. Shaw laughed and promised he would return. Shaw was also pleased with the fine weather. A man stretched as he walked down the street, passed several alleys in silence, and began to feel a strange, confusing unease. At first he couldn't understand what was happening because he felt someone nearby. Then he realized he was being followed, and asked that no one say the bandits had come back to take revenge since the last time, and he didn't know what to do. Shaw noticed he was being followed, and the same men who attacked Mizuki were watching, but they might not be able to catch him off guard because there is a classic technique for losing a tail. The man sprinted around the bend and vanished. He had been waiting for the stalker to show his true face. Suddenly a girl caught her foot on his legs and landed hard on her back, and Shaw realized she was a child as they stared at each other in silence. Tears filled the girl's eyes and she cried loudly. The man pleaded with her not to cry and insisted he hadn't done it because people were starting to pay attention to him. Nervously, Shaw searched his pockets and finally pulled out a piece of candy, handing it to the girl and saying he would give her something sweet. The girl said Maria told people not to take anything from strangers. He realized that if that had happened in his world, he would have called the police immediately. Shaw assumed she did not know him because he was the castle's master scientist. The girl said she did know him and that he ran the show, and he breathed a sigh of relief when he realized she truly knew him. If she recognizes him, he is not a stranger. He always gives his friends a sweet treat. The girl was silent for a while, then her eyes sparkled. She accepted the candy. She found it delicious, and the man said he had made the candy from fruit himself. She's doing the right thing and avoiding taking anything from others because she doesn't want to be kidnapped and sold, and she knew this because Maria told her. Suddenly someone behind her thought she had something, and the boy warned her not to take things from strangers. The girl said at once that he was the show's real master and that she knew him well enough to take things from him. Someone in the crowd called it unfair. The cat-eared boy said he knew him too, called him an old man, and said the man could fool his sister but not him, and Shaw thought it was cute. Shaw was surprised to find a beastman working at the castle where she served, and when the beastman realized they were talking about him, he learned he was her brother, so Brother Nim asked them not to treat him like a cat. He wanted to tell me she had been bragging that she had a cute brother, and asked again that I not call him cute, since he will be the head of the family, and when he grows up, will earn a lot and make life easier for their mom and sister. Shaw began crying in his shower because he thought it was great, and he will also give him something sweet. All the other children said they help Maria every day. The man replied at once that it was fine, and he would give one to each of them. He wanted to find out if they were playing stalking to see how close they could get to people. It was good that it was him. His master would not have been better, let alone their elf. He asked if they knew his master. The children all answered at once that she was a witch. I immediately decided to find out about the elf, and they replied together that she was a destroyer. He said it was definitely about her. That elf is dangerous, and you can never tell what she's thinking. One boy said he knows that if a true master sees the show, he will turn it into a magical experiment. The girl said she could even become a real monster. Shaw laughed, saying people say there's no smoke without fire, so maybe that's what happened, and if they keep playing games like this, their parents will be upset. The children sat on the stonework and stared at one another in disbelief. As it turned out, they had neither a father nor a mother. Shaw was surprised, even though he had heard there was a shelter here. Maria and about 20 children lived there. Shaw said he did not like their dangerous games, but would teach them a different way. The children were interested in his proposal. Shaw sat down, sharpened a piece of wood and carved it into a helicopter, then started making more toys for them, even crafting stilts, and made a slingshot and entertained them, tailoring his play to their interests. Shaw thought children were adorable no matter where they came from. His income came from what he loved, true scholarship. Donating to a shelter for those children was an option. Arriving in this world broke, he earned 3 gold coins a month plus rewards for each invention and had about 100 gold coins saved. Darkness was falling, so Shaw told the children it was time to leave because it was late and offered to take them to the shelter if they showed him the way, and the children agreed at once. A 2-story house came into view before them. The children cried that they were home and turned to Sister Maria to say they had returned. Maria, without turning around, told them she was welcome home. While fetching water, the girl noticed a man with her children. He greeted Maria and said he had met them in a city. The girls suddenly let go of the rope from the well. Throwing her arms around Shaw, she cried and called him Mr. Zero. The man was stunned by the girl's actions. After all, he wasn't insignificant. The children turned to Sister Maria and said it was a show and that he was a true sage. The girl looked at him in silence, blushing as she realized she had mistaken him for someone else. After she apologized, Shaw quickly reassured her that everything was fine. He made sure she was Maria, and she, still shy, confirmed it. A girl ran up to Maria and said Mr. Shaw had made them lots of toys. The girl said she knew he had taken care of the children, admitted she feared she could never repay him, and asked him to come more often. Shaw sat at the communal table, apologizing for eating them up. Maria said the children were very happy to see him, asked everyone to cross their arms together, and then said, "Itadakimasu." The children echoed their mentor in unison, and Shaw didn't understand what it was or what they were saying. Maria said itadakimasu is a foreign custom of thanking for food, and it was taught by Zero. The man went quiet and asked them to wait, thinking maybe Zero was as Japanese as he was. The girl turned to Mr. Shaw. She regretted jumping to conclusions. The girl wasn't sure he wasn't a Zero. Shaw was confused and thought he resembled him in some way. Maria said that wasn't the case because he was more courageous. Maria said he looked different, but they shared the same aura. Zero said the next time they met he would look different. Shaw couldn't tell what kind of person Zero was. The girl said he saved her life when she nearly died of pulmonary tuberculosis and healed the eye that had been blind since birth. Shaw didn't know this could happen, but he still didn't understand who this Zero was. He began to look into the girl and whether he was really a learned magician, since he was very skilled, and he asked me to tell him more about him. Maria agreed at once and said it happened when she was 12. Born blind and shunned by her family, she was sent to work in the imperial pavilion of the night sky. A guest who visited them infected her, and that is how she became sick. After being kicked out of the night sky pavilion, he began to wander the streets, and the girl realized she was disappearing. One day she found herself in the dark, sitting by a large tree, and I decided this would be the place where she would disappear, just when she was about to take her last breath. A silhouette appeared in front of her, and a voice came from behind it asking if she wanted to survive. She thought God had come for her, and answered as if bathed in bright light. She accepted his proposal, and when she woke again her cough had completely disappeared. As her vision returned, Shaw thought it was as if God himself had come for her. The girl agreed, but there was one thing. She said Master Zero said there is no God in this world, and if people think there is, it is either a being whose knowledge and technology are too different to understand or a being that deceives them. The man said he agreed with him on this, but he wanted to know what happened next. Zero suggested she stay with a teacher at the orphanage, living with Master Zero and the other children. They enjoyed many happy days. One day Master Zero told her he was returning to a distant foreign country. As she ran after him in tears, Master Zero said Maria would take care of their connection and that if it existed she would see him again. Shaw looked surprised, but Maria continued, saying that Zero had said it meant a fateful connection, a connection of souls. The man knew it. This Zero was probably Japanese. Besides Blaha, someone else had come into the world. Convinced she would see Master Zero again, she vowed to treasure their bond when they reunited. The girl said the teacher died 2 years ago and hoped that this time he could pass his connection to these children. Shaw fell silent, then turned to Maria and said he wasn't a man named Zero, but would do his best. They began building a water pipe for them that supplied water directly to the house. He gave the children water pistols, but Maria got a newly invented flashlight. The girls at the table were stunned. Shaw handed the girl the coins, and she thanked Mr. Shaw through tears for his kindness to them, saying she did not know how to repay him. He hired a carpenter through Rassel's back to fix the job. Surprised, he paid him 80 gold coins for the job, but the hero valued safety above all. Suddenly someone crashed into Shaw, and the man fell. A man's face was close to his chest as he began to examine it because they were larger than the master's, and the girl said he was bad. Trying to explain, the man asked for a minute, but the unknown woman did not understand where he was looking. He looked at the silvery hair, long ears, and dark skin, and Shaw wondered if it was really a dark elf as she called him names again. Unhappy that he kept staring, she saw the show start at the same moment, did not understand why he hurried his apology, and said she was in a hurry. The next day Shaw walked into the diner and greeted Ninny, who said she was glad to see him, and just then someone arrived looking for him, which surprised him. The elf he'd been running from stood by the table and glared at him with indignation. Trying to talk about yesterday, he was cut off when the girl interrupted and stammered that she was very sorry. The man was in severe shock. She had come to see the true master called the demon, but the more she heard about him, the more she realized he was the one she had driven away, and since he often dined there, she decided to wait for them. Embarrassed, Shaw apologized for staring and said it was a man's nature, and the girl said she was used to it before introducing herself as Fei Fei and calling him a true master again. Suddenly, the girl grabbed him and asked for his help because she hoped he would save her village, but he did not understand anything. He learned that the valley road to Fei Fei's dark elf village was blocked by huge landslides on both sides, leaving it isolated. The dark elves' village sits at the end of the western gorge on the Felon side, and they were lucky to catch a ride in a merchant's wagon heading west. Shaw believed dark elves could use magic, and the girl said they could but not with a boulder that size. The guy couldn't believe he was that big and didn't know what to do, so he thought it might be worth asking a magician who knew powerful magic. Fifi warned it would cost too much. Their village was poor, but true masters are different. Sometimes they work not just for money but for an idea. He laughed and said it happens, admitting he's weak, especially when a beautiful woman asks for a favor, and finally he understood what it means to be a man. He told her she could call him Shaw and that he might think of something on the spot. She agreed, and they kept riding in the cart, which rattled loudly. He couldn't tell what made the noise. The cart driver turned to the true master and said they were in trouble because demons surrounded them and eyes were already appearing in the bushes, ready to attack. Faye said they were black wolves and realized it looked like they had entered their territory. Frozen and unsure what to do, Shaw listened as the girl said they would distract them. Wolves stepped from the bushes and bared their teeth. The elf turned to the Shaw and said they could climb a tree. The man shifted his weight, grabbed a tree branch, and climbed on top of her as the wolves began trying to climb the tree. Shaw said there were too many of them. The girl was upset she didn't have her bow because it was being repaired. The guy grew nervous thinking they were stuck standing there, and Faye reminded him about magic, saying she has fire magic but doesn't want to use it. Black wolf skins sell for high prices, so burning them makes no sense. Shaw said that is not his point. Lightning magic will burn several people and the shock will knock over those nearby. The girl said enthusiastically that she understood and was fine with it, but if lightning struck this tree, it would be a disaster, so he had to come up with a plan. At last, an idea came to him. The spirit's blessing will protect their surroundings. His lightning magic lowers air pressure, evaporates water, and forms thunderclouds. The girl liked it, and the guy ran a weather simulation. No water source was here, but the forest should hold surprisingly large reserves of moisture. Clouds filled the sky and lightning began to flash, and after a while a bolt struck hard toward them. The guys jumped down and ran away from the tree. All the wolves lay motionless, and Faye liked it. A man sat in the carriage waiting for 2 passengers, and the girl asked the merchant how much he would pay her for them. The merchant wanted to be sure because they deserved it. The girl said she had enough money. Shaw said that if you look at it that way, he had always wanted to try the black wolf. The girl said this was it, referring to the show, the boulder blocking the road to her village. Seeing this boulder, he thought it was impossible because he didn't know what it was or how it got there, and it was so huge the people beside it looked like bugs. Everyone was pleased to see Fei Fei back. The girl turned to the men and said she had brought a true master. The residents cheered, hoping they were safe, but he had no idea how he could destroy it now. On this continent, a huge cliff stretches from east to west near the Dark Elves village. The Dark Elves village sits at the end of the valley formed by the split. A huge stone about 30 meters high fell from the cliff and is now stuck in the valley, blocking vans and other vehicles. A man used magic, it exploded. Shaw tried to hide from the blast, and when the smoke cleared there was a black hole where his magic had been. Air compression only scorched the surface. In the old world, that would have been like a dynamite blast. He needs a higher heat index. Air heats up when compressed because molecules packed into a small space move more forcefully and release heat. So compressing the air twice produces much more heat and increases the force of any rupture. Activating different types of magic at the same time is difficult but not impossible, and this is the first time he has tried to activate the same magic twice. Double activation of different types of magic is like holding a baseball bat in your palm with both hands, while double activation of the same magic is like stacking one baseball bat on top of another. A man is going to try something, so everyone must stay away from him because it is dangerous and you need to concentrate now. The center turned white. If so, the temperature must be above 5,000 degrees. A man tried his method on the stone, and it began to melt. He kept turning the screw deeper, and his eyes widened in surprise when black liquid flowed from the stone. Molten rock began to erupt nearby, and Shaw froze in fear because it was so close, all because he had let his guard down for a second. Drilling a straight hole must have caused him to break out by increasing the pressure. Faye feared for her life. Relieved that Shaw could open his eyes, she called to make sure he was all right. The man apologized for running out of magic, and she knew the show would have problems with the boulders. If they don't tear it down, they can clear the way for the wagons. Shaw thought he could use his magic to make a pass. It's a special kind of magic they can only use twice a day, so it may take time. Smiling, the girl said it was nothing compared to the time they spent developing their own skills. Shaw did everything he could to clear the passage. The stone shattered, but not completely. Do not insert the double compression shell horizontally. If you do, lava and an explosion erupt as soon as it is released, and that is dangerous. Instead, move it straight, then slightly down and back, then straight again, then down and back a little. Shaw said it was very tiring, and at Fayette's request, the master could go to rest. Shaw lay on the girl's lap, blushing with embarrassment. Surprised by their affection, he felt a little afraid. The girl said that was not true, they were just trying to serve someone useful. The other elves said a bit resentfully that they had never been treated so well. Faye leaned out of the tent and told them to shut up, and they still had to clean up the trash. The man thought these elves were real Amazons. 10 days have passed, and each time they fire the magic it's the same, but the hole in the boulder has grown bigger. At last the tunnel opened, and everyone celebrated that the passage to the village was clear. The elder of the Dark Elves did not even know how to thank him for what he had done. Shaw was amazed by the elderly man and tried to guess how many years he had lived, and I told him aloud not to worry about it. Confirming the double activation of magic was enough for him, and he couldn't imagine the howl Leela would have let out if he'd done it in the castle. I thought they might have a rare mineral found only in this region, or something with an unusual color. One of the girls said she had seen black stones, and the man asked again because he thought they were obsidian. The girl ruled out obsidian because it crumbled. Faye said she couldn't see how such a fragile stone would be useful. Shaw wants to see him and know where he is. He was told he was on a rock wall at the entrance to the valley. He wanted a tour on the way back. The girls agreed immediately. Faith said Shaw was the village's benefactor, and she will stand by that. A limestone hill rose before them, and the girl said the stones were here. The elf said this layer is made of black stone, but it is so fragile and crumbles so easily that it is not even suitable for an arrowhead. Shaw realized he needed to start knocking, and after receiving a small piece of rock, he wanted to be sure it was what he thought. A man placed a rock on another rock and tried to set it on fire. Faye was very surprised that this breed was burning. He was glad Yugolki existed in this world and believed it was the true path of the Industrial Revolution. The elf was surprised to find the stones burning and assumed it was magic. The man said the fire had been started by magic, but the stone itself can burn. That solved the fuel problem all at once. You could even build a steam engine from it. Either way, he will take the sample to Her Highness and report everything, and we can gather people to investigate. Regretting the distance, the girl said it was already dark. The man said they'd stay somewhere that night, but she wasn't coming back at that hour. She added that they'd stopped in a field. Shaw was taken aback. Fei said they always stay here and told him not to worry because they are elves. He said that wasn't the point, and he just didn't think there would be a place for him. The elf admitted it was messy, but said he could stay at her place where she would cook for him. Morning arrived and Shaw sat on the couch stretching with an aching back, and after his morning pull-ups he looked off to the side. Faye slept peacefully, so the man decided to leave the room quietly. The queen was a little angry with him and wondered where he'd gone. Then she realized he had gone to the Dark Elves' village and thought it was probably cozy there, so she let it go and hoped for good news, and the man agreed happily. He set a few lumps of coal on the table. Layla looked at one in confusion and said it was just a black stone. They were now in Rasail's workshop. The man thought they meant the stone could be used as fuel. The queen realized it was not a magic stone. The man confirmed it was not a magic stone and contained no mana. Then Shaw asked to watch, poured coal into a special device, and set it on fire. Leela found it amazing, and Rissel said it has impressive firepower and will help deal with the fuel shortage. Shaw said it could be used as home fuel. They will steam and heat the stones in furnaces to remove impurities and turn them into a fuel called coke, and then they will be able to process more iron than ever before. One problem was smoke pollution, because burning coal sent smoke and soot over the city and posed a threat to public health. During the Industrial Revolution, coal smoke killed many people, and the problem will worsen as a country becomes more prosperous. Leela assumed he was thinking about what to do. He replied that of course he was. When smoke gets into the water, soot and toxins dissolve in it. Coal smoke contains hydrogen sulfide, which dissolves in water, and she worried about how he would handle the poisoned water, but one possible solution is to throw insects into it. Insects are animals that eat dead bodies and silt, and they keep rivers and canals clean in a world without sewage systems. They needed to account for the number of insects, but believed they could handle it. Leela understood everything, Rassel agreed, and the girl suggested sending a team of researchers to the coal mines. Opening the mine will require paving roads, cutting through forests, building bridges, and constructing a railway to carry coal, so there will be a lot of work. Stella drew the girl's attention and said Shaw had returned. The man immediately looked at the master and Stella, unsure what had happened. Rubia could not understand why he had been gone for 10 days without informing her or his master. He said he had business and had been in the Dark Elf village. The girls were shocked to learn about the Dark Elves, and the man did not know what they were. The girls assumed he went there to look at big breasts, since Dark Elves were known only for that. Shaw said they were wrong because he was helping them with their problems. The master understood everything, but could not decide whether he preferred her breasts or Dark Elves, and Shaw said he preferred his master's chest. Rubia wondered what had made him draw those conclusions, and I realized he had something to compare it to, Faye. She entered the room to ask Shaw why he was taking so long, and everyone looked at her, annoyed. The most interesting moment came when an elf and a dark elf met and were surprised by each other's appearance. Shaw grew uncomfortable and said this was one of the 36 strategies. And the best way to escape is to escape, the girl said, calling his name loudly and resentfully, and he shouted goodbye After running between the shops again, they stopped at a convenient spot while Shaw tried to catch his breath, and he soon became convinced that elves and dark elves did not get along. Fifi explained that the dark elves have a single legend that says elves and dark elves once shared common ancestors and lived together in the elven world. They did not get along, and their conflict destroyed their world, so they all came here after abandoning their old civilization, and Shaw was struck by how deep the story was. Suddenly a group burst into the show shouting that everyone had to run, and people were running out of the city shouting there was danger and they had to get away. One of the residents stopped, turned to the master of the show, and asked him to help them in some way, crying as he spoke about a child kidnapped by a demon. Startled, Shaw looked toward where the people were running. A boy from the orphanage dangled in a demon's paw, calling for help. The demon was enormous, surrounded by a whirlwind of leaves. People downstairs were calling for someone to help the child. The boy was being held by a harpy, and Fei did not understand why the harpy was here. Shaw realized his lightning bolts and Fei's magic could reach the child, yet unsure what to do, he asked the question and found the answer almost immediately. He remembered the slingshot he made while playing with the children at the orphanage, and combining his magic with Fei's would be enough to destroy them. Kinetic energy is proportional to mass, and mass is proportional to the square of velocity. At the same time, he launched one projectile towards the monster. A heavier bullet is more powerful. Increasing its speed by using magic to reduce its weight also increases its power if you turn off the magic right before the bullet hits the target. Shaw was sure she could take a man's head off. He also realized he had to shoot him again. An arrow suddenly struck the monster in the heart, leaving the man puzzled. Raisel held a bow, called the monster a filthy creature, and shouted at her to let the boy go. Shaw saw him and thanked him for his help. The bird began to growl and whine in pain. Fei said she would attack and planned to drop masonry on them. The hurricane circling the bird thickened, so they all had to move into the building. The bird changed form and started firing projectiles at the townspeople and heroes. Without warning, Stella stepped in front of the guys, and they immediately raised a protective barrier. Shaw was relieved to see her. He thought her work was amazing. The barrier does not block his view but completely stops physical attacks. Stella turned proudly and said she could even block the dragon's fire. Shaw couldn't understand how it worked, and he saw that photons could pass through him. This means it doesn't work against lasers, microwave magic, or attacks by solar panels that collect sunlight. Rubella appeared suddenly and found it very troublesome. Spotting Shaw, she warned him to move away because she might hurt him. After all, the girl was about to explode. A man called out for her to wait, thinking she was crazy. There were children here and she could destroy the whole city. Rubia said several victims would have to be rescheduled. Confused, the girl did not know what to do, her face serious. Ficky jumped onto the balcony toward Rossel, drawing him slightly away from his task. Jock, she asked him to hand over his bow and simply took it for herself. Drawing the bowstring, she sent an arrow with all her might straight at the monster. The giant held the boy in his paw and growled at the city again. His hand released, and the boy fell quickly. Fei screamed for Shaw to pay attention. Shaw immediately looked up and saw the boy falling. He ran toward the little boy who was already close to the ground and finally used the power of weight loss. Shaw made it and grabbed him near the ground just in time. He immediately began jumping on the window. He reached the door and the girl in a couple of jumps. So surprised, she closed her mouth. He immediately offered to take care of the child. Scared, the girl took the boy into her arms with trembling hands. Tears filled her eyes and she looked confused. Shaw urged her to get inside faster, shouting because he feared for the city's residents and for the child who nearly fell prey to the bird, and the girl gathered her thoughts, shook her head gravely, and agreed with him. The bird raised its sword, immediately drawing Shaw and Fei's attention, and they called the guy for help again. It attacked again, and many shells flew toward the guy. He couldn't hide from them all and was struck several times, one blow hitting him right in the heart. She screamed his name in fear. Stones strike the man, injuring him. The dark elf cries out in concern. His phone fails and memories from his past come back. He records a video, greets the camera, and introduces himself as the show, calling himself the king of inventions from the channel. The presenter shows the alarm clock to the camera and says they will start assembling today. This round alarm clock works on its own. Near the end, he notices the recording stopped halfway through. He's reviewing the footage. In the final moments, he asks viewers to subscribe and like the channel. Noticing that 12 people have watched his video, but only 3 have subscribed so far, he is pleased to see the subscriber count rising and new comments appearing. The protagonist wonders what to shoot next and dreams of buying a new camera. His name is called and he opens his eyes, taking a sharp breath. The girl beside him says he was wounded in the chest and will treat him immediately. Shaw says he's fine. Something in his inner pocket saved his life. He wonders why he is so reckless. A man asks where the harpy is, and she is circling overhead on alert. After they save the child, the girl says the child can be blown up and is preparing an attack. Shaw stops her and says they can't do that because they want to minimize damage to the city. The girl asks what they should do, and he says he has an idea but isn't strong enough to cast magic on something this big, so he needs it. She understands what he's saying. The main character started to run off, saying he would lead her somewhere and that his signal would tell them to start. The man conjures a sphere and launches it at the harpy, who does not expect him to act that way and is visibly surprised. She steps back while Shaw shouts at the master to start now. Resolutely, she raises her staff and casts a spell to increase weight. After the monster falls, the main character pulls out a knife and rushes at her. While flying, he makes himself heavier and stabs the beating heart with all his might. Blood gushed from the enemy's body. He collapsed lifeless. The monster was defeated. The girl asked Shaw if they were done with her, and according to the girl, Shaw said they were. The crowd began shouting that the show's master had defeated the harpy, and everyone cheered. Stella says she rarely finds such a fresh harpy corpse and its valuable parts and plans to have him brought to the castle later. Dad comes up to the rescued boy and his mother, and they hug, crying with relief. Layla suddenly appears on the carriage. She asks Shaw if he is okay. Shaw looks surprised to see her. The girl says she heard a noise and ran over, and seeing him covered in wounds, she asks if he killed the demon. The protagonist says he didn't do it alone and that his friends helped him, including the master, Stella, and Fei, the dark elf. The gun shop owner also helped him, and he is deeply grateful. His Highness says she will give them 2 gold coins to honor their brave deed. A man asks if she wants him to give them away. Layla says she has no cash with her and will give it back later. She thanks Fei for her help and asks her to check in on them. Inside the castle, Fei duels another knight with swords. The girl secures a complete victory by disarming her opponent in battle. Layla stands with her hands on her hips, proud, and says her skills are beyond doubt. The assistant asked if she was sure, saying dark elves could not be trusted, and she replied that this was true, adding that although it was known a village existed on their territory, the dark elves are not official citizens of these lands. They were ready to hire the most capable people, and the girl replied that she had heard they had done a lot to protect the show and keep the city safe. She claims Mizuki has just left for the Empire and offers to take her place as escort. The elf does not believe her. The woman asks whether that means she will be paid. Layla replies yes, a little shy. The man is happy for his girlfriend. The girl says serving in a castle is a dark elf's dream. She's very grateful to the main character, and Layla, watching from the sidelines, says the girl will probably regret it after a while. After a while, the man enters the room and looks at his broken phone. He knows he's a little out of shape, but he's been a good friend to him. He thinks he can't make a video about the things and magic he invented in this world. The man puts it in a box, closes it, and thanks him for saving his life. Sitting on the bed, he thinks about the demons that trouble him. The master told him that demons rarely attack people in this world. He understands why demons kill people, since they are defending their territory, but the harpy clearly came to the city to kill. Shaw wondered if there was something wrong with her. Weeks later, the main character walked down the street, spotted a carriage, and chuckled to himself, surprised. Shaw realizes she is very extravagant, and wonders why she uses the back gate, since high-ranking people use the main gate. Nim calls from behind and says good morning to the girl. She asks where he had been to get such a wound, and he replies that he went to the forest to gather some ingredients. The main character asks her if she wants breakfast. The girl tells him Her Highness is waiting for him in her office because they have a guest. The guy assumes this is the guest in that cart. In the office, Leela asks Rubia how things are going. Rubia says she cannot help her in any way. A man comes into the office and asks if she wanted to see him. Layla is relieved he has finally arrived. The girl introduces the show to Princess M. Iluna. Bowing, he says he is glad to meet you. The scarred girl introduces herself as M. Iluna Faltas, the first princess of Faltas, and asks to be called Maruna. The princess says that in Faltas he is known as a leading master who seeks the truth, and only he can help her. Seeing the burn, the man realizes she is badly burned, and when the main character asks what kind of wound it is, the girl says that, as usual, she was in the forest collecting a plant as a hobby when a demon attacked her. Rumors have been circulating that demons sometimes attack people, but she never expected to be attacked herself. Layla remembers harpies appearing the other day. She worries demons are turning up more often around Farlane and has even heard rumors that flying dragons have been seen here. The man is surprised by the dragons. Turning to Shaw, the girl asks if he can do anything for Maluna's wounds. Shaw replies that if his master could not, he is powerless. The main character recalls that in his world burns are treated with skin grafts or by rebuilding skin from fragments. Suddenly, the man remembers the orchid clone he created twice using magic. The show considers whether the same method could apply to skin. She asks if he has a better idea. The main character says he has an idea, but it's theoretical and he's unsure whether it can be put into practice or what side effects it might have. The man says it can regenerate slowly, so it will take time, and the princess agrees to everything, saying there is nothing good about the royal family's ugly daughter. She says she won't be able to return to her country unless she gets her old face back, and the man does not understand what she means. Maruna puts her hand to her chest, says she has nothing to lose, and asks him to do it. He can't understand how she can call herself worthless just because she lost her looks, and he wonders why. The girl says a person's values don't depend only on their appearance, and that's true. Maruna insists she is the princess of the small kingdom of Faltas, and to secure her family's and her country's prosperity, she must marry into the right family at the right time, so she must always remain beautiful. This is her royal mission. The man wonders if her fate is to marry for her country. The girl agrees, saying she was born a rose, not a wildflower. The other girls watch quietly as the main character tells her he understands. He admits the method has never been tested on humans and that he does not know what side effects or consequences it might have. The show warns the girl she must be ready for this. She agrees. Sometime later, the princess lies on the operating table while the main character stands beside her in a medical suit and mask. With a scalpel in hand, he calms himself and believes the master will support him if things go wrong, so he decides to try. He says he'll start at the shoulder and disinfect it with alcohol. Myrna agrees. After administering anesthesia, he uses forceps to dip the object he needs into the liquid. He says the drug temporarily numbs the affected area, so she feels no pain, using spider venom as the anesthetic. While making chocolate, he also extracted the poison, which works quite well as a local anesthetic. He warns her that she will soon be so cold she won't even be able to feel him. Maruna says she is really getting cold. Ruby is surprised he even thought of that and says he can't use paralysis magic. Even a regular doctor with no magic training can use magic. He asks the patient if she feels ill or notices anything, and she answers no. The main character makes an incision and will roll up the cut skin while casting spells to speed tissue growth and reaction. Using the growth acceleration spell promotes normal dermis growth and, when applied simultaneously, stimulates proliferation of the cells responsible for that growth. Skin cells multiply much faster than normal, and the new skin gradually forms and pulls the wound closed. It can regenerate about 3 centimeters in half an hour, and with his magic, he can restore 5 to 6 centimeters a day. Today he says she looks amazing. He shows her a mirror and says it only healed partially at first but has healed well. She says she has never seen such a beautiful mirror and smiles. The main character apologizes to her and asks her to look at what he did, not at the mirror. The princess examines the regeneration and says it's a wonderful recovery. After a while, Layla snacks on pancakes with Mont Blanc-style cream and boiled beans, and the main character is surprised to learn they are cousins when Layla says her late mother and Queen Felties were sisters. The girl says they only manage to see each other once a year, but they used to play often at the Fartises' royal villa by the lake. Maruna says she misses those days, and the man looks at them in disbelief. The princess says this place feels like another world anyway. Her eyes fall on delicious pastries she has never seen before, a bright room with beautiful crystal-like glass. She tells Layla that yes, Layla must be resting because she has such a good master and assumes Layla is jealous. The girl faces Shaw and offers to pay him twice or even 3 times as much if he agrees to work for her. Layla becomes angry and demands to know how she can say such a thing in front of her while she is still alive. Laughing, the main character apologizes and turns down her offer, saying he swore to Her Highness to develop this country and cannot leave. Surprised by a true master's oath, the girl compares him to a knight. She had never seen anyone like him because most true masters go to more worthy employers. He says it's not about money, and though he has money for research, he only has enough for food right now, which is the main thing. Layla tells the girl the show donates its earnings to an orphanage, and Maruna is surprised. The protagonist says this is all for Far Lane's benefit because children are a national treasure. The girl finds him strange, but the princess says that makes sense. Maruna says it's unfair that a talented child is denied the chance to fulfill their potential just because of where they were born, and she believes investing in children, who will one day be the backbone of their country, will improve their future. The main character suspects the princess may have the gift of a true master. Layla is surprised he did not realize it right away. The girl says she studied with a master. Shaw begins to answer, but Stella suddenly enters and says she feels something sweet. Maruta greets her and says it's been a long time, and the girl looks surprised. Amazed by her appearance, Stella asks what kind of scar it is and calls it vile, so the main character realizes Stella was the princess's master. They treated her for 3 days, and the treatment went well. On the 4th day, Princess Melona's developed a high fever. The treatment regenerated the skin by forcing the body to speed up its natural healing. The effort takes an equal amount of energy, and the main character realizes she needs rest. In the middle of the night, the show is called. Layla invites him over to tell them the story again. The main character asks where he left off. The girl reminds him he stopped at the scene where the heroes will mourn their unfulfilled love. The protagonist asks the girl how she is, and she says she's much better today. He notices that Princess Melona's burn scars are gradually healing. Standing, the main character calmly waters the plant in front of him. Suddenly, a princess approaches him, says it's a rare plant, asks to see him, and he does not refuse. Shaw says the treatment is ending. Maruna agrees and says she doesn't know how to thank him. In response, the protagonist says the important thing is that she's fine. The girl blushes and clings to him. He drops the watering can and tells her she shouldn't have done it. Apologizing, she says she has never felt this way before. He tells her that once her face heals, she will start doing her duties. She agrees with him, but not completely. Shaw broods and admits she probably mistook the excitement in her heart from the healing of her burn scars for feelings for him. The girl disagrees with him and says he is a wonderful person. Princess Maruna says she is not right for him. That is correct. She asks whether their fates would have been different if he had met her before meeting Layla. He said no, and added that he was indebted not only to Her Highness, but also to the master, to Stella, and to everyone who works in the castle. Still confused, the girl asks him again, and the protagonist says he meant Miss Rubia, explaining that when he arrived here from the forest, she saved him and made him a true master. He admits that without that he would never have met her. She seems upset, laughs sadly, and says she would rather be born a wildflower than a rose. The princess turned to leave and said at last that her parents would come for her next week. She is surprised the king and queen will come in person, saying she texted them that her burn scars are healing well, and they want to visit Her Highness and him. The main character smiles and says he should show them how beautiful her face is in this case. The girl turns to him, smiling through tears, and agrees. By next week, Mirota's face is fully healed, surprising King Faltas and Queen Eliza. He calls it a miracle, but she says she cannot believe it. The princess herself tells them Shaw healed her face. Shaking his hand, the king declares he has performed a true miracle, leaving the man surprised and confused. He says this isn't a miracle, but a healing brought about by reason and magic, and by the princess, who endured harsh treatment. The king wants to thank him for rescuing his princess from permanent harm. The main character says even the masters bow to the king. The man refuses, thanking him not as king, but as the father of his beloved daughter, and Fultus bows his head and thanks him. A short time later, the main character shows the queen and the princess his workshop, and tells them they may look around until His Majesty's meeting with the queen is over. The woman turns to Shaw and asks whether the magic that healed her daughter might be affecting others. Pointing to her face, she says she has developed wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. The main character calls them wrinkles and says that, since he agreed to remove the sag under her chin, she is surprised he can do it. He says it's not as difficult as treating the princess's burn scars. Shaw asks if she wants to try. The woman is pleased and agrees. King Faltaz and Layla end the meeting. King Faltaz says they had a short but productive time together. Layla assumes they are busy since they've already decided to leave. Feltos turns to his wife and says it's time for them to get ready to leave. Her appearance suddenly catches his eye. He asks Eliza what happened to her face, and she laughs, pleased he noticed. She says she decided to try a local craftsman's magic, and the man is stunned and asks if this is the elixir of youth. The main character tells him she is still the same age, that he only stretched the wrinkles on her face a little, and they will return to normal after a while, and he cannot understand how that could happen. The king says his magic will be popular with women. Some time later, rumors of a magical cure spread quickly among the continent's royals and nobles. After the princess regained her beautiful skin and the queen became young again, applications from the ladies and requests from the royal families poured in. The main character operates on a woman and says he will freeze her skin. Day after day, the wrinkles and sagging disappear, but the show rejects it. He almost cries, realizing he is not a cosmetic surgeon. Layla and Shaw sit down for tea. Layla notices Shaw looks unwell. Shaw says he is running out of energy and his body will not hold up if he keeps taking requests day after day. Layla is glad he is making money. She remembers hearing Maruna was flooded with offers as soon as her face was fixed, and the girl asks whether she had been ugly before. A man asks her if Princess Maruna will be able to find a suitable match for herself. The queen replies that many people in the world would jump at the chance to look good. Viscafuras in the far lane might suit Maruna in her view, and people trust him because he's not a bad person. The girl thinks he will never be a family man and finds the title too weak to recommend. The main character says the title can be anything and gives an example. He offers to put him in charge of producing crystal glass, declare that the Viscount has achieved mass production, and raise him to a title. That will make him a duke in no time. The girl calls it a lie. The man says it's only at first glance and believes Princess Maruna learned from a real master and can be trusted to make glass. The queen says Princess Maruna loved him and calls Shaw a terrible person, and the main character does not understand what she means. Her Highness then sent a letter to Faltaz introducing the Viscount, saying that large-scale industrial development was underway on the Viscount's lands and a promising future awaited them. Princess Maruna fell in love with him right away, and they are now happily engaged. The main character briefly visited the Viscount's estate to teach them how to make glass. If he runs a glass factory, every other project will fail. Still, if he wanted to protect the people of Far Lane, he had to do it. The main character had not visited his mentor's house in the forest for a long time. Rubia, worried, says he walked all this way and asks what he's doing. The man says he remembered the harpy the other day when he heard she was attacked by a demon. Shaw says that if the unexpected happens, Farlane should be able to defend himself instead of relying on magic. That's why he wants to make a fire potion, which is basically gunpowder. Startled, the girl asks whether he means it as a weapon, and the show responds positively. Confident in his mastery, he knows she can picture what would happen if the weapon became powerful enough. Rubia hesitates at first, then agrees and makes clear she will not interfere with his work. As his master, she says she will use every power she has to stop Shaw if he tries to use him for evil. The man smiles and says he's glad she's his master. In that case, he says he can get to work, and because it is dangerous, the main character asks her to be there. He immediately begins making gunpowder, planning to use saltpeter. Forest humus and manure from the owner's house are the raw materials for this. Mostly it's his master's waste and a little of his own. Manure is mixed with humus while magic speeds fermentation, and it starts to smell bad. The protagonist covers his nose against the smell and wonders why he keeps mixing everything up when he's in another world. Shaw tells himself this is for the good of the country. The smell is foul, but he's known it since childhood. His parents live in a rural area where sewage trucks pass through the district from time to time. He throws crushed pills at him. Rubia arrives suddenly. Pinching her nose, she asks what the smell is. The main character says he told her to stay home because it was dangerous and to hold her nose. The girl says she does not understand what he is saying and believes the master cannot fail to see when the disciple grasps the truth. The girl moves closer, then immediately steps back from the strong smell. Shaw says he warned her. The man tells her to watch but keep her distance. Fermentation has increased significantly, and this liquid should contain saltpeter. He will take her out of here. nitro dissolves in water. He must put this substance into a cauldron of water and heat it with magic. It may be unpleasant for someone. After processing all the products, allow the water in the boiler to evaporate. The pot walls are now coated with a thick layer of white, needle-like crystals. These are nitro crystals. The mixture contains many impurities, but they will be able to increase the frequency by repeated recrystallization. Rubia asks if it's a fire potion. Shaw says no, it's only one of the ingredients and will return to the workshop tomorrow to handle the rest so he can make black powder, but besides gunpowder, he needs charcoal and sulfur. She says it's amazing he made this from something that smells so bad. He explains it's made from waste. She asks whether it came from her own waste. He freezes and doesn't know what to say. Rubia is furious with him and shouts loudly. In the workshop, Stella laughs because Shaw made a weapon from Rubia's excrement, and the person next to her is angry with her and blushes. The girl says it's no surprise he smells so bad. The main character insists he took a bath and his clothes look clean. He wonders if his nose is faulty. The steel seems to cleanse him. He is surprised she can deodorize and finds it convenient. She asks what he plans to do with these crystals. The man tells her he will add saltpeter and charcoal to this saltpeter in proportions of 7 to 2 to 1 and says to grind them as finely as possible and mix them evenly. Stella asks whether it is really a weapon. The show encourages you to try it. It takes a small amount and then removes the air to prevent ignition. The protagonist lights it with a candle and it lights up. Stella says it's no big deal. Shaw says it needs to be compressed afterward. The girl is surprised and asks again. He says to dampen it with water and wraps it in a cloth. Shaw says you can put a load on it, but they use magic to squeeze it as fast as possible, and compression makes the reaction more efficient and more powerful. Once it dries and crumbles, they use magic to crush it into granules. He will light it again. With a candle, he lights the powder on the cloth. The fire burns fiercely. Rubia calls it a different matter. Stella finds it amazing, and the black powder is now ready. He only needed to prepare what he'd asked the dwarf master for and present it to Her Highness. Some time later, the queen asks whether he has invented anything else, and he says yes, asking her to look. He draws a simple weapon with a flip lock. Their dwarf craftsmen cast the barrel and bullets. The girl asks what it is, and the man says the tube has a charge of gunpowder at the end and inserts a lead bullet from above. He fires at the dummy, and the bullet pierces the armor. All three girls are surprised when he explains that the lead ball flew out and punched a hole in the armor. If a human is inside the armor, it will pass through flesh and may even strike hard-skinned demons. Layla asks if it is magic. Shaw says it is not and calls it science. The girl asks whether even untrained people could fire it from something like that, and whether peasants and girls could defeat monsters. The man responds positively. The queen, with her hand to her chin, says thoughtfully that this truth is frightening. Suddenly, the main character laughs and asks what they're afraid of, saying she'll find a use for him, leaving the girls at a loss. The queen tells him not to prank her. The show complies. The protagonist says weapons and gunpowder will not be sold because they need them to defend the country if necessary. Gunpowder can help people by breaking rock and speeding up coal mining. Stella warns that if this spreads across the continent, it will open the gates of hell. Nobel invented dynamite for civil engineering, but it was soon used for war. History of the Old World shows it cannot be used only for peaceful purposes, and the main character will not let this world repeat that mistake. Layla agrees that if it falls into the hands of someone powerful, war will follow, and the Harpy attack and the Maluna incident show that demons are becoming more active. When unrest comes, attackers will target citizens and villagers. The girl knows it is the royal family's duty to be ready to protect their people in hard times. She leaves weapon production to the main character. He says he understands, and Layla believes the information must remain strictly confidential as a state secret. He decided to make gunpowder himself in his spare time, but mass-producing it with others is a bad idea because it would lead to information leaks. After Her Highness gave him a top-secret budget, he bought livestock manure as raw material because he thought it would make production much more efficient. Although their stocks keep growing, they must handle black powder carefully because it can ignite from friction or static electricity. They keep it wet, spread it across the castle, and when the time comes, they just dry it with magic. He decided to build another weapon. After a while, they tested anti-aircraft weapons at the training ground. After the volley, an explosion occurred. Kaka and Tika say it's cool. They are Chick's twin brothers. These men are former hunters with sharp eyesight. Kaka says that was because they had a good view. Tika says he would have done the same. They can tell which animal is 1,000 kilometers away, so they took a defensive stance. The main character jokes that they are very close. Layla is pleased he flew so far and asks how far he can go. Kaka assumes he has just flown 400 stops. Kaka also says that if you aim a little higher, he will fly another 32 stops. They have the exact parabola the formula requires in their head. Shaw realizes they have great talent. The queen says she did not know all this was possible without magic. They ask whether this tube and magic dust can give them the same power as magic. The main character agrees, tells them not to tell anyone or take the powder with them, and the others go along. Layla turns to the Chick brothers and tells them they are the best fit for the job, and starting today they will work on the show as gunners. The girl also says their salary will be raised in proportion to their work. The brothers thank her, and Layla orders the main character to continue developing defensive weapons. The girl adds that Razil was upset to learn the main character had been so busy lately he had not visited him, and Shaw felt embarrassed and said it was awkward. She reports that excavations are underway at the coal mines and in the artisan's workshop, and the roads and bridges he commissioned them to build are under construction. She adds that it will be years before a holiday is held to show their inventions, and they ask him why he does not visit them soon. He agrees with her and promises to do it, and the main character smiles, saying it's time to get ready for the festival's main event. Surprised, the main character stands before a large column and says it is huge. He came to see the finished blast furnace in the castle workshop. The show calls her amazing. The main characters operated most of the mechanisms, and Mr. Rassel and the dwarves used their expertise to complete this blast furnace. The man says the best thing was teaching them how to make coke charcoal. Until now, raising the temperature required magic, but with this furnace, they could ship iron without it. The blast furnace needs ventilation, but that is still done by magic. Shaw remembers that in the original world steam engines pumped air, and he wants to get on with it as soon as possible. Building an external heat engine or an internal combustion engine requires a lot of development. Even if they understood the principles, they would still have a long way to go before they could put them into practice. Shaw is confident Rassel and his team can build such an engine if they are taught the principles, but they will still need at least a working model. The man beside him turns to Shaw and thanks him for his hard work. Another man says they're all working hard, and Rasil agrees. They have laid a trolleybus track inside the castle, he says, and it makes moving coal and cargo much easier. Trolleybuses will be widely used in coal mines, the man says. He is glad everything is going well. He agrees this marks the start of a new era. Roads and bridges were built to reach the mines. Coal was brought in 2 or 3 wagons at a time. It took more and more energy. The city is growing busier as more people learn about its development, and the main character walking down the street notices something. He wonders what kind of magnificent building this is when a young man approaches and asks if he is the master. Relieved they'd been lucky to meet the master, the man pushes the main character inside and says he has a wonderful product. The show has no time to make sense, and they ask what kind of store it is. He sees the man beside him looking dangerous, assumes it is a criminal place, and grows afraid. The man asks which servants he likes best. The main character is surprised to find servants here. Given the world's level of civilization, he realizes it's not surprising there are servants here. The main character didn't notice at first because they weren't in the castle. Her Highness hires as many servants as she needs at the right price. Pointing to one of the servants, the man offers himself as a guard, saying he is a former warrior and will work for only 50 gold coins, a good deal. The protagonist says he won't buy servants and finds that unacceptable. He's surprised because he doesn't like servants. The man says this place includes children of ruined merchants and the same provincial nobles, and they accept anyone who has nowhere else to go. In private, the show compares this to a global safety net, and the man says someone will eventually buy them, though the servant would be lucky if the man did. The show reacts negatively and says thanks. As the main character starts to leave, a menacing man blocks his path. The man says there are smart people who could help them. He adds that the girls upstairs can read, write, and count, and offers to check on them. Shaw sees they won't let him out, so the main character agrees and says he will just watch. He'll wait downstairs so he can take his time and look around. The main character sees many beautiful women upstairs and thinks the space is meant for the elite, like a luxury car showroom. Shaw suddenly notices a strikingly beautiful girl and privately wonders if she is a fallen aristocrat or something like that. He can't place the strange feeling, as if she's dressed too well. Suddenly she gets up from her chair and walks toward him. Approaching the bars, she bows. The girl thanks him for picking her up and calls him Mr. Zero, which surprises Shaw and reminds him of what Maria said about Zero. Assuming she is tied to Zero, the The man says he is not Zero, but the show's master, and asks if she knows him, and she replies that she does and that Zero is her master. He asks whether she knows Maria from the orphanage and whether she helped treat her illness, and the girl replies yes. She says she purified streptomycin and injected it into Maria. The protagonist is surprised because streptomycin is an antibiotic used to treat tuberculosis in his world. He cannot understand how she knows about an antibiotic that does not exist here. Shaw walks down the stairs and asks the man to come up. Once they're upstairs, someone asks if the main character likes anyone, and he points at the girl and says he does. The man says, as befits a real master, he has a good eye and she is an exceptionally smart girl who can read, write, and count perfectly. The buyer asks the price, and the seller says he will sell it for 250 gold coins. Shaw is surprised by the price and can't see where it comes from. The man tells him the girl is not only smart, but also highly skilled. Her capture cost them many lives. Surprised, the main character doubts it's true and says he only has 100 in his pocket, while one man stares at him menacingly and the other assumes he's joking. A man gets an idea, hands them a piece of fruit, and asks if it will fit. The bald man calls it a small merchandise fruit. The other man doesn't understand him. Even a rotten fruit like this costs 100 gold, and this one is a raspberry. People will pay 300 or 400 gold for it. The man smiles and says he will have to settle for berries to make up for the missing gold. Shaw thinks about the cost of lil merch berries and sees it as a big loss but calms himself. The girl is released from the cage. Nanami answers his questions but says little herself, and he wonders if Maria knows anything about it. After a while, Maria is surprised he brought her. The main character asks if she knows them, and she replies yes, saying this is the doll Mr. Zero brought. Shaw does not understand what she means by mentioning the doll. At first, the girl thought it was one of his henchmen, but Zero-sama told her it was an automaton. The main character is surprised and asks whether Denami means a robot or something similar. Denami says that, in a broad sense, a robot is the closest thing to her. The show assumes she has no will of her own and is programmed. The girl says he's right, and Shaw reacts with surprise. The main character says she is soft and warm and finds her completely indistinguishable from a human, noticing her hair, wet lips, even her teeth and saliva. The man leaned in close to look inside her mouth. Maria stands beside him in disbelief. The show apologizes. He asked Anami where Zero was and who Zero was, because Zero was capable of creating something like that. The girl says her body is entirely biological and that they were separated in an accident, so she does not know where he went, and the main character says he hopes they can find out where he is now. Convinced everything will be fine now that he is here, she asks him to come to them again. After a while, the main character asks Nanami for the square root of 2. She asks how many digits he needs, and he says he wants 10 decimal places. The girl gives the number 1, 4,142,135,623. Then Shaw asks for the cube root of 2, and she replies 1. 259,210,498. The main character is surprised at how quickly she answers. After trying different calculations, he found that no matter how many digits, the answer appeared instantly. The show calls him a human computer. Her skill needs no comment. Designing in his head while she runs the machine, he made a gear at random. He can now quickly picture rotary, cycloid, and other gears that used to need complex calculations and accurately work from that mental drawing. She is a genuine Biak NC machine, which surprised him because he thought he had been tricked, and in his world the machine would cost them millions. The main character remembers the man saying they hope to see him again. Her knowledge is priceless. He has the most powerful assistant Zero ever left behind, and now believes he can build anything. After a while, the main character and Layla drive a car. The girl shouts that it's great. She asks Shaw whether this is his horseless carriage, and he answers yes, suggesting calling it a car because it drives itself. The girl likes this name. The main character says it's a car, so she doesn't tire like a horse and can drive all day if she has water and fuel. Layla says at first she didn't know what to think when he brought a new girl. Now she sees it as a very important invention. The man doesn't know which girl she's talking to. When the masters learned about Nanami, they almost captured him. He managed to put his craft into practice with high accuracy. Ami's appearance was a success and showed all his potential. He built a steam engine. This engine, as the name suggests, runs on steam. Coal is burned to boil water. Steam flows through the tubes and is alternately directed to the left and right sides of the pistons. This produces a back-and-forth motion. The back-and-forth motion is converted into rotation by a crank, a wobbling wheel. The rotation is then transferred to the wheels to drive the engine is the most famous steam engine in his world. It's a fairly fraudulent invention because it omits many details, but they still manage to make something like it. Nanami designs it, creates the model, loads it into the machine, and he just has to assemble it. That's the kind of work cycle they get. Shaw prepared the cauldron himself and handled all the small tubes, adding a lot of his personal flair. It is not very fast and now reaches only 30-40 km per hour. The girl asks him if he can go faster. The queen turns to the main character and asks them to go faster, saying it would be more fun to speed up. The main character thinks Her Highness is obsessed with speed and tells her he could be faster with more gears, but he warns the roads are uneven and going faster would be dangerous. However, if they build a railway, they'll be able to travel faster and with better control. Leela doesn't follow what he's saying. Shaw says this is what the railroad they built inside the castle looks like. Connecting the country to the coal mines will make transport much more efficient. He adds that building more railways between cities will increase the movement of people and goods, because railways played a major role in his world's industrial revolution, and he wants this world to follow their example. Shaw says it will take a lot of time and money, because it involves more than their country and concerns the development of the whole world. After a while, Maluna says, surprised and admiring. The girl says it's fun and not fair, so Layla tells her to try riding with the show because it's fun, and the girl asks if she can. Then the girl decides to go for a ride, gets behind the wheel, and the main character is surprised to see Princess Maluna driving. It isn't hard to drive, more like a single-speed automatic with no clutch or gear shift. Maluna asks him if Hay will sell her this car. The girl offers him 500 gold coins as payment. The main character is stunned by how much that is and realizes it would be 100 million yen in his world. He asks if it's just a small amount. The princess says it's not much, since she plans to make and sell the same item from it. The girl calls it a natural investment. The main character finds it brilliant and feels a strong entrepreneurial drive. Some parts are hard to reproduce, but he's sure she's very smart, and though it may take time, they'll reach mass production. He knows he'll have to leave her car later. The steam engine mechanism produced on the machine was shown to the craftsman. He then began building a steam engine in the workshop. The man calls it a clever design. At first, they set out to build a steam-powered machine to pull coal trolleys. That would take 5 to 10 years of serious research, yet it only took 5 months to create a real moving car. Finally, the day of the festival arrived, the day Farling was to present his invention. During the festival, the queen addresses the crowd and thanks them for coming. The girl asks the person beside her to say a few words before the festival opens, and everyone is watching the show while he is at a loss. The main character wishes everyone present a good evening, introduces himself as a performer, and says he is a disciple of the master of Rubia. He says they will now visit the exhibition halls inside and outside the castle and see firsthand the various developments their country has created in its own unique way. In fact, the main character discovered them and through trial and error brought them to life like this. Remembering all his artisan friends, he speaks of the country's artisans and the material department that supports them. He says that, as Her Highness Princess Layla said, his wish for the people has broad support, and he raises his hand to ask for love and favor. Fireworks erupt over the castle in a sudden volley, filling the sky with beautiful explosions, and everyone is stunned. Despite hurrying, he managed to make fireworks with the correct colors. Orange comes from the fiery reaction of sodium salts, white comes from tin, and green from copper. The pipe is an ordinary bamboo reed. The sight reminded the main character of the toy mortars he had made in the master's house, where his otherworldly inventions began, and a man in the crowd called the fireworks a wonderful thing. Rubia watches the beautiful picture with fascination. Suddenly Shaw approaches and calls her a master. She is surprised when he asks her to step outside the city for a minute. Shoppers move through the market as a man hands a woman a skewer of food and asks her to hold it. Rubia thanks. The girl asks whether he is sure about walking like that because he looks like a star today, and the main character calms her and says everything is fine, then it's just business meetings, and he is confident Her Highness will take care of them. Rubia smiles and says her life has completely changed since he arrived. The girl remembers she wanted a quiet life in the forest. The guy looks embarrassed and apologizes for what happened. Ruby smiles and reassures him that everything is fine. She tells him that if she had stayed in the forest that long, nothing would have happened between them. She looks at him sheepishly, says she wouldn't feel that way, and the guy blushes, not understanding what she's talking about. Her face goes red, and she says she owes him an apology. Ruby says that if he is as strong as he is now, she should recommend him to the Imperial College for official recognition as a true master so he can continue his journey. She asks him if he knows why she didn't do it, and the blushing main character thinks she wanted to be with him. Turning away, he says he's not interested in formalities, won't leave the far lane with or without her, and adds that he should apologize. After he explains why he kept the secret so long, Rubia wonders what he was hiding from them. The main character is afraid but still tells her he came from another world, and the girl opens her eyes in surprise. A townsman points at the sky and asks what it is, and the person beside him says it is too dark to see. A person says it's a bird, another person says it's too big to be a bird. The man shouts that she is coming. He can hardly believe his eyes and says it cannot be, then realizes it is a dragon. A monster attacks the city, and people run away screaming in fear. The main character is startled when a dragon appears. A dragon flies over the city and the people below fall to the ground in fear. After a while, the dragon simply flies away. The main character watches him go. Nobody understands what is happening, and someone in the crowd asks if he has flown away. A man asks what it was all about. Shaw turns to Rubia to check if she is okay, and the girl says she is. The main character says she went back to the castle, and he's worried because he's heard the number of demons is rising, but never expected dragons to appear in the city. A business meeting is underway at the castle now. Telling only the queen not to cause a panic is enough. The main character quietly tells Layla the dragon has appeared in the city. Layla does not believe him and asks what he said. The next morning, Mizuki contacted him from the Empire by sending a postbird with a letter on its paw, and the queen read it and said the Empire had been attacked by dragons the previous night. The letter horrifies her because the Empire is in flames from dragon fire. Shaw realizes it is the same dragon they saw yesterday, and Layla says it flew west. The main character asks Her Highness what it means. The girl, horror on her face, tells him it means he will be coming back here again. Everyone was stunned. The queen ordered her assistant to evacuate Mizuki immediately. She obeys. Shaw realized the Empire and the city were about 400 kilometers apart and asked how fast dragons fly. Stella tells him they fly about 50 to 60 leagues an hour. The man repeats that it's about 60 leagues an hour. 1 league is about 16 kilometers, which means about 100 kilometers per hour, and if you include the time spent on Mizuki's letter, the dragon will reach them in at most 2 hours. The main character asks Stella and Feifei if they have fought dragons because he assumes they have lived long enough. Stella, surprised, says no and asks him not to talk about her age. Kid assume they can block fire with spells. The girl reminds him they are talking about legendary creatures. The elf says old books describe dragons that devoured people and burned the peoples across the continents with their fiery breath. Shaw and Rubia stare in shock at her words. The protagonist gets a headache and feels like crying. Layla says firmly that something must be done. A man offers to evacuate the townspeople to the forest. He addresses the medium and gets a response. Shaw orders her to send all the beastmen through the city to warn the townspeople to run into the forest in their clothes. The maid says she understands and runs away. The main character will ready the defensive guns on the ramparts and set them up for action. He is not sure they will work against dragons, but they might scare them off. Rubia says she'll fight, while Stella says she's always dreamed of this but doubts she can use magic on a giant that large, and Rubia assumes she can use her magic only once, which Shaw says should be enough. He turns to Layla and urges her to evacuate. Layla does not understand what he means. She refuses to leave her people. Shaw worries about her. The protagonist orders the Chinkar brothers to prepare the mortars right away and carry them to the eastern rampart, and they agree. He has 6 shells. There had been another cartridge, but it was given to Countess Maluna for defense, and he will magically dry the gunpowder in his reserves. Beastmen in the streets shout that the dragon is coming, and the girls urge everyone to run into the woods. A little girl tugs at her dress and asks her older sister what will happen to Farlane if a dragon comes. Maria reassures her and says she is confident the master of the show will protect them. The man shouts at his assistants, asks what they are doing, and urges them to get out of here faster. His students stack their tools, and one of them says they need tools. The master says if they survive, he will make new ones, and orders them to leave everything. 4 hours have passed since they got word from Mizuki. That night, the queen is told that the crossbow has been launched. After she asks whether the residents have left, he confirms it, and Layla says there is still no sign of the dragon, but they must keep them ready. Shaw thinks it would be better if he had not come. Privately, Shaw asks the dragon to go for a walk somewhere else. A sudden flash streaks across the sky. The others turn to the master of the show and look up, and the main character anxiously tells them what he sees. Kaka says it's a dragon, and Tika yells that it's coming. The protagonist asks Nanami about his size and height. Nanami says the dragon's wingspan is 54 meters and it flies at 1,212 meters. Sho realizes it's impossible. Nanami says the dragon somehow cancels the laws of physics, and the man says he knew it. Layla asks them what they're talking about. Shaw turns to her and says it's theoretically impossible to fly with a body and wings like that. He assumes the dragon uses magic to reduce its weight. The girl is surprised that he believes dragons can use magic. Nanami reports the dragon's height reached 900 meters. Fifi, Stella, Rubia, and Leela are very worried. She later says the dragon has dropped to 800 meters. He looks up and sees the dragon approaching. A dragon with an open mouth rushes toward them. The Chick brothers cry out in fright. The show turns to them and tells them not to be shy, and he reminds them of the intersection point. The dragon is already 200 meters above the ground. Tika says there is still a little left. Shaw sharply orders them to fire now. The men cover their ears as a volley of shots rings out. A man shouts that a hit landed. They successfully struck the dragon. They must take shelter from the wind as the dragon screams and moves in close to the protective wall, and the queen tells everyone not to be afraid and to prepare to attack, then orders all guns to open fire. Crossbow bolts hit the dragon as Tika and Kaka fire their weapons again. Protective spell shields the dragon, surprising the main character, and Layla is also surprised that he can use magic. Suddenly, the main character realizes that unless they break through the dragon's protective magic, their master's magic cannot reach them. Another explosion goes off, the monster is furious, and the main character panics. They try to figure out what it is. Tika shouts that he sees a car. The man is wondering. He shouts that it's Princess Maluna. The girl is driving. Everyone is surprised they equip the car with a mortar. The show calls it absurd, Layla. Layla agrees and says this is the whole Maluna. Shaw sees the dragon's protective magic fading, thinks the sudden attack disrupted his concentration, and shouts at Ruby to hurry. She turns to Stella and asks for protective magic, and Stella shouts that she understands and tells her friend to smash them all. Rubia commands everyone to lie down and casts an explosive spell. The staff she holds starts to glow. Shaw steps closer to Leela and tells her to be careful. When the spell ends, the dragon vanishes and everyone is at a loss. Stella can't believe they did this, while Shaw sees no trace of the dragon and urges everyone to stay on guard, ordering anyone who can move to turn the crossbow and load the mortars. Frozen, the guy looks up. The dragon is unharmed and preparing to attack, and the main character watches in horror. A dragon prepares to attack, growling loudly, and the main character realizes he is about to release the flame. The queen orders an evacuation and directs all personnel to leave. Stella steps in front of the show and tells everyone to get behind her, using her magic to cover them while urging them to move faster. Breathing fire, the dragon destroys towers, homes, railways, and store counters. People in the forest are watching. The boy clutching a book is terrified the castle is on fire. Nim is worried about Mr. Shaw. With her last strength, Stella holds back the onslaught of flames. Feifei covers Leela. The attack ends at last and the girl collapses, exhausted. Shaw calls out and rushes to help. The castle and its surroundings are on fire. Awe floods the main character as he realizes Stella has just used up all her magic, and if the flames return, she will have no magic left. They must act before he decides to attack again. He doubts anyone could harm him. Even Ruby's mortars and spells bounce off his scales. They realize there is nothing they can do. The protagonist believes that if he stops now and begins to believe they will end, they will. He found it very difficult to aim where there were no scales, so he called to Feifei and asked her to aim at his eye. Confused, the girl doesn't understand him, but the man says he has an idea. The dark elf says she understands him and jumps forward. She fires an arrow and hits the target dead center. The dragon is furious. Layla asks him why he makes him angry, since if the flame returns they are finished. Shaw tells her this is the core of his plan and that he is about to fire his double activation magic into the dragon's open mouth. Turning to the Chikaka brothers, the main character urges them to prepare a mortar. They obey. Shaw knows the mortar will break as soon as he uses it, so he should try his best. The main character casts a spell, pours all his magic into it, squeezes the air twice, then pushes the spell into the weapon so the Chika brothers understand the flame is coming. The main character shouts the attack signal while their guns open fire. An air compression during the show causes an explosion that throws everyone backward. The charred dragon falls with a loud crash. The main character climbs out of the wreckage, hoping everything worked out for them, and looks down to ask if the dragon is dead. The man shakes Her Highness by the shoulders to rouse her and asks if she is all right. He urges her to come to her senses, as Shaw informs her that they have killed a dragon. The girl asks if anyone is still alive. She tells anyone still alive to scream. People shout triumphant cheers. Rubia throws herself into the show. She cries and hugs him. He says he's glad she's safe and that Stella and Feifei are alive. Stella says they almost died because of his magic. He laughs and apologizes. She says he's really bad and dangerous and forbids him from using compression magic. The main character asks her again why she banned it. Rubia says she is considered dangerous because reaching her core would reveal too much power. Shaw asks her again and recalls the ultra-high temperature, ultra-high pressure, and plasma. He finally understands what she means and calls it a thermonuclear reaction. Stella is silent at first, then asks what that means. The main character explains that everything in the world is made of tiny particles, and when those particles are repeatedly compressed and heated to extreme temperatures, they break apart and scatter. When they collide and merge, they lose weight. The girl asks what happens when they lose their weight. Shaw explains that the weight converts into a force equal to the square of the speed of light. She asks what the speed of light is. The main character first thinks 300,000 kilometers per second, then says it is 187,500 leagues because a league is about 1.6 kilometers, and the girl says that's quite a lot. Stella asks him how he can speak so easily about something that's been forbidden for so long and wonders how he even knows all this. The audience is a little unsettled, but he still decides to tell them everything. Calling them to listen, he tells them he has come from another world. Feifei, Layla, and Stella remain completely calm. He is puzzled by their reaction and slightly surprised. Stella says she knew it. Layla says he said it a little late, and the show is surprised by their strange reaction. She says she didn't believe he came from across the sea and explains she would surely know someone like him. The man is surprised and says it sounds very plausible. He looks at Rubia and asks if she believed him. Rubia says she suspected this from the start. The protagonist arrives, shocked. The queen says his origins don't matter. The town and the castle are in complete disarray, and if Farlane wants to regain his former appearance, they will need his help. Rubia asks Shaw if he'll stay with them. The main character speaks to Her Highness and his master, hesitating and unsure what to say or what he would do if he could return to this world. Shaw is unsure if he would want to come back. He would post the video again as before. Despite not knowing what would happen next, he ultimately answered no. In that other world, he had faceless subscribers. In this one, he had friends. The main character prefers to live among the people of Far Lane, whom he sees every day. Shaw smiles and says he will continue as the master of Far Lane Castle. All the girls are smiling and very happy. They wonder what to do with the dragon. Layla says they will, of course, take it apart and turn it into gold. Stella agrees with her. They say dragons are worth a lot of money. When they found those rotting dragon corpses hundreds of years ago, they raised enough money to buy a small country, and now they have one that is fresh. Her hands show approval. The girl says the books claim a huge gallbladder has healing properties, and if it has stones, it will cost a fortune. The main character asks about meat. Stella doesn't understand her. Shaw asks whether they can eat dragon meat. The girl gives no clear answer. Suddenly, Nami says dragon meat is edible. The show praises her and calls her a good boy, and he salivates as he imagines dragon steak and hamburgers today. The man runs toward the dragon with enthusiasm. The main character quietly considers whether dragon bones could be used to make broth. Rubia is outraged by his behavior. Smiling, Layla says Shaw's curiosity is endless, and that's why they love him. Smiling, Stella says she envies him for his flexible thinking and pure curiosity, and calls him a real master. A year later, Farlane is still recovering. Beneath the rebuilt walls lie the dragon's remains, now the city's new symbol. Residents are looking forward to the country's development after reconstruction. The show still needs a lot of work. Minding his own business, he does not notice Layla come up behind him. Layla says he keeps coming up with strange theories. Shaw explains he's working on a theory that will let them talk even when they're far apart, giving the example that Layla will be able to chat happily with Princess Maluna from inside the castle. Excited, the queen asks if it is possible and when they will be able to do it, and the man says he doesn't know. Stella and Rubia enter the room. His master says he's still working. The second girl wants a snack. The man smiles, agrees, and offers pancakes.